Chapter 1306. Taking advantage of the night, Chu Yang sped forward. The direction was the Yi clan's territory. The place where purple crystals were densely packed was a place of great fortune. The moment when yin and yang intersected. The moment when heaven and earth shone together. Chu Yang was going for the second segment of the tribulation sword. He couldn't wait to get the second segment of the tribulation sword and let his brothers come up. The leather boots on his feet had long been thrown away somewhere. He just ran barefoot on the ground. As he ran, the starlight shone in the sky and the boundless earth under his feet. Chu Yang suddenly felt as if he had entered a wonderful realm. He suddenly flew up. It was as if he himself was in mid-air, wandering and soaring under the starlight. On the ground in front of him, he could clearly see another him running wildly. The night wind that blew against him messed up the hair of this other him and caused his clothes to flutter behind him. As he ran, the internal energy in his body slowly circulated. He felt waves of pure energy of the earth surging up from the soles of his feet, and waves of pure spiritual energy of the universe pouring down from the top of his head, one up and one down, forming a perfect cycle. It went one round in his body and returned to his dantian. The second strand of primordial real silk in his dantian also seemed to be trembling and slowly growing stronger. The cultivation in his body was also constantly being purified as the energy of the earth kept surging into him. He felt as if all the pores on his body had opened up. Wisps of impure internal energy gradually spread out from his pores, and the empty space was replaced by pure spiritual energy of the universe. The impurities in his body were excreted from his pores and dissipated in the wind. Only the grease that adhered to the surface of his body was instantly dried by the wind. Watching himself running, watching his own body changing, this was a wonderful phenomenon. Zhang Tai thought to himself, watching his own body changing. Chu Yang ran tirelessly for an entire night just like that. When the east was slightly brighter, that consciousness finally entered his body under the guidance of a wave of fatigue. Only then did Chu Yang stop in a forest and leap onto the treetops. He rested for a while. 1/10 of the cultivation in his body had already become pure spiritual energy of the universe. This 1/10 occupied the center of his dantian, surrounding the tribulation sword. The other spiritual energy of the universe was outside, filling his entire body. When all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth has been converted into pure energy, I should be able to reach 4th or 5th grade supreme martial artist, right? Chu Yang checked his body and pondered. After leveling up to the supreme being level, every step he took forward, even Chu Yang felt that it was difficult. If one were to talk about the difference between middle grade saint and supreme grade saint, if he only needed one step, then from 1st grade supreme martial artist to 2nd grade supreme martial artist, he needed at least 10 steps. And these 10 steps, every step he took was greater than the previous one. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to ascend from the 2nd rank to the 3rd rank. No matter how difficult it is, I'm already on my way, Chu Yang thought. He fell into meditation. He couldn't see his own appearance now, but if he did, he would definitely be shocked. His hair was a mess sticking to his scalp. His face and neck were covered in black grease, making it impossible to see his face clearly. His black robe was also in tatters. Shouts could be heard from outside the forest. Sword light flashed. Chu Yang woke up abruptly and looked outside. He saw a person running toward him as fast as lightning. Behind this person, a shining sword light chased after him like a meteor. It was obviously much faster than the person in front. Chu Yang's heart shook when he saw this sword light. Sword Supreme Being. And a high-level one. At least 3rd grade. Why would a Sword Supreme Being suddenly appear here? Who was he? That sharp sword aura made Chu Yang almost think that Gu Duxing had come. The person in front roared, and balls of starlight suddenly burst out from his body. Then his body suddenly accelerated and rushed into the dense forest like a whirlwind. The starlight dissipated. With a series of crackling sounds, countless branches and trunks broke. That person had already reached a place not far from the big tree, where Chu Yang was hiding. That burst of energy was still rushing forward. But his body was like a clay ox entering the sea, disappearing without a trace. Even with Chu Yang's eyesight, He could only see that he leaned against a tree trunk beside him and disappeared. What kind of martial arts was this? Could this be the unique martial arts of the 3 Stars Divine Clan? Although it was just a glimpse, Chu Yang had already recognized that this person was the elder of the 3 Stars Divine Clan, who had given him an incomplete version of the heavy pill in the Zhuge clan's dungeon. He didn't expect that he had already escaped. It must be the power of that heavy pill of his. However, the Zhuge clan was really good at hiding. This kind of news actually didn't leak out. Just as he was thinking, that ball of sword light also followed closely behind and penetrated into the dense forest. A dragon-like ray of light chased along the path ahead. Along the way, there were thunderous sounds, and all the big trees were crushed. In just a short moment, the sword light suddenly turned around and was outside the forest again. Then, it penetrated into the forest again and suddenly stopped. It stopped not far from the big tree where Chu Yang was hiding, where the Divine Clan elder had disappeared. The sword light dissipated, revealing the tall figure of a man in black. Chu Yang suddenly felt a wave of admiration in his heart. When the Divine Clan elder came in, he immediately set up a deceptive formation without any hesitation and hid himself. But when this person chased in, he actually detected the other party's scheme in an instant and immediately retreated. When he came in again, he obviously used more or less the same power as the Divine Clan elder. When he reached the place where the Divine Clan elder had disappeared, he automatically stopped. In other words, he determined that the missing Divine Clan elder was within this area. This kind of judgment and insight was extremely shocking. This person was tall and slender, dressed in black. His face was handsome, but naturally carried a sense of coldness and sharpness. Just by standing there casually, he was already like an unsheathed sharp sword, awe-inspiring. In his hand, there was a long sword that shone with a cold light. At this moment, the cold light was faintly discernible. On the tip of the sword, there was still blood dripping slowly. He just stood there, his eyes quickly turning and looking at the tree trunk that the Divine Clan elder was leaning against. Chu Yang's scalp went numb. The degree of meticulousness and agility of this person's thoughts had reached an unbelievable level. The next moment, swoosh, 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 with a few sounds, 5 people rushed in like a gust of wind. Yi Zui, you. The black-robed man's gaze was fierce. He bent down and spun. Sword light suddenly exploded in mid-air like a thunderbolt. Even Chu Yang felt a burst of strong light before his eyes. At this moment, he almost couldn't see anything. A few screams sounded. The 5 people who came in later had already been divided into minced meat. They floated up and fell, their flesh and blood smashing into the bushes in the forest. At a glance, Chu Yang only had time to see a starlight mark on the forehead of one of them. The next moment, this person was smashed into pieces. This black-robed man attacked so quickly and ruthlessly that Chu Yang had never seen anything like it before. The murderous intent of this sword, it made Chu Yang's heart turn cold. His palms also couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Dantian. The tribulation sword suddenly became restless. This sword could actually trigger a reaction from the tribulation sword. Chu Yang was shocked and hurriedly comforted it. This sword has a strange smell. In the consciousness space, the sword spirit had already been awake for some time. It was just that he was still a little weak. At this moment he suddenly spoke. Strange smell? Chu Yang frowned and asked. In that instant just now, that sword that seemed to want to kill all living things also made him feel strange. It was just that. It was an indescribable feeling. It seemed sinister and yet not sinister. It seemed terrifying and yet not terrifying. But it just made one feel uneasy. The sword spirit's voice was a little heavy. Maybe I saw wrongly. I hope I saw wrongly. In this sword, I actually felt the smell of demons. The smell of demons? Chu Yang frowned. Extraterrestrial demons? The sword spirit didn't speak again. Thinking of that shout just now, Chu Yang thought. Yi Zui? So this person is the first successor of the Yi clan, the #1 ruling clan in the martial world. Yi Zui, the Yi clan's Grand Duke, who is as elusive as a dragon. There were many legends about Yi Zui in the martial world. It was said that this Grand Duke of the Yi clan was originally called Yi Shirtian. But later on, for some reason after getting drunk, He suddenly changed his name to Yizue, and anyone who dared to call him by his original name, Yi Shirtian, would be sentenced to death for the crime of disrespect. At this moment, Yizue slowly retracted his murderous aura. He said indifferently, "Third Elder, you can't escape. You'd better come out. I, Yizue, guarantee that nothing will happen to you." There was no sound in the surroundings. Yizue was neither anxious nor impatient. He said indifferently, "I, Yizue, have been in the martial world for 35 years. No one has ever survived my pursuit, and I have never lost sight of any enemy. You can't hide from me, nor can you escape. Instead of running for your life, why don't you come back with me obediently? That way, you can still receive some courtesy. Do you really want to live a life worse than death?" Chu Yang's heart twitched. So this bastard had been in the martial world for 35 years. In that case, he was at least 50 years old this year. But his face still looked like that of a youth. Being called a Grand Duke at 50 years old. Chu Yang suddenly felt a cramp in his crotch. If it was an ordinary person, he would have already been a grandfather, right? Here he was still a Grand Duke. "You're not coming out, are you?" Yizue's voice slowly carried some murderous aura. He took 2 steps forward slowly, and raised his head slowly. "Do you think that I won't be able to find you after you hide in the tree this time?" The next moment, Yizue's 2 piercing gazes met with Chu Yang's 2 astonished and bewildered gazes on the tree. Chu Yang felt like fainting. Why am I so unlucky? I just found a tree to rest in, and someone actually mistook me for the main character?" The 2 of them, one on the tree and one under the tree, looked at each other. Yizue smiled. "Third Elder, your disguise this time is really not bad." Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He cursed in his heart. "You're the Third Elder. Your whole family is the Third Elder. I'm so fucking unlucky. I'm trying to save some drafts. Starting from the 20th, the monthly votes will be doubled. It has already been decided. Today is the 20th, 27th and 28th, will also be updated twice. Then no matter how much I save, the double will be released on the first day. The 3 days at the end of the month will completely determine the results of this year. When the time comes, I hope everyone will support me. We've been proud of the world for a year, but we have to make the final decision in the last 3 days. Either we make a complete turnaround, or we just walk through it in such a repressed manner. But I firmly believe that victory belongs to us. The last 3 days will definitely be crazy. Let's be on guard. Brothers, sisters. Chapter 1307. Yizue, Grand Duke of the Yi clan. Original name, Yi Kanmeng. After that, the Yi clan changed the name of Remnant Dream to Shur in the Yi clan Yi Shirtian. However, after he came of age and achieved success in swordsmanship, he changed his name to Yizue. This person could be said to be the #1 genius of the younger generation in the heavenly realm, the Sword King. Yizue was obsessed with swords since he was young. He started to come into contact with swords at the age of 1. At the age of 3, he could start learning swords. At the age of 15, he became a Sword King. Back then, with the help of the clan's abundant resources, he soared all the way to the upper grade. However, he faced a bottleneck for a long time at this level. He only became a sword sovereign at the age of 25. Even though he was delayed by 10 years, he was still the only sword sovereign among his peers in the heavenly realm. Ever since he became a sword sovereign, Yizue seemed to have opened a door to the sword Tao. Within 3 years, he became a sword sovereign. Within another 3 years, he became a sword saint. Within another 8 years, he became a sword supremacy. Now, some people said that Yizue was already a 3rd-grade sword supremacy. Some said that he was a 4th-grade sword supremacy. Some even said that Yizue's sword cultivation was not inferior to the legendary supreme martial artist Bulu Qing. Of course, Chu Yang scoffed at the last statement. However, this also proved how scary Yizue was. In the decades that Yizue had been growing up, whether it was power or women, all the temptations in the world were like fleeting clouds in front of him. Only the sword. He heard a saying before. Only by being obsessed with and intoxicated by the sword can one become a sword master. He originally wanted to change his name to Yizue Sword. However, this name was really not nice, so he could only use the first 2 words. Now this sword maniac was facing Chu Yang. Chu Yang was helpless. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I say, this expert, you've got the wrong person, right? Yi Zui stared at him for a while before he smiled coldly. I've often heard rumors that the people of the Divine Clan, especially those who have reached the upper echelons, are always changing. I didn't think much of it. Now that I've met you, I know that it's true. Third Elder, you can even change your aura. Chu Yang bared his teeth. You've really got the wrong person. Yi Zui's countenance gradually turned cold. Why? You're still not coming down? Could it be that you'll only be willing to come down after I invite you? Chu Yang heaved a huge sigh and jumped down from the tree. I say, Duke Yi, where did you see me, resembling the Third Elder? Yi Zui's sharp eyes narrowed slightly. Hee, even if you're not Third Elder, how do you know that my name is Yi Zui? Chu Yang was speechless. He said, those people you killed just now were shouting your name. Do you think I'm deaf? Yi Zui smiled coldly and slowly raised his sword. He pointed the tip of his sword at Chu Yang. I'll ask you one more time. Third Elder, are you coming with me? Chu Yang said angrily. Why are you so stubborn? I really didn't. Before he finished speaking, the piercingly cold sword chi was already surging over. Chu Yang let out a wild cry and turned around to flee. Damn it! This guy is a third-grade sword supremacy and probably a fourth-grade sword supremacy. And he's a direct descendant of a big clan. If I don't fucking use the tribulation sword technique, I'll be asking for trouble. Once I use the tribulation sword technique, he recognizes me. In such a situation, I can only run. A hint of admiration flashed across Yi Zui's eyes, and he immediately chased after him. Chu Yang was definitely not that Third Elder. Yi Zui was of course very clear about this point. But if he didn't recognize him as the Third Elder, how could he force him to fight with him? To Yi Zui, the current Chu Yang was much more important than that Third Elder. Otherwise, how could he have discovered the tree trunk that the Third Elder was hiding in? He actually pretended to ignore him and turned around to find trouble with Chu Yang? The Third Elder was very important. It was said that he was involved with a huge treasure. The purpose of Yi Zui's trip was of course to capture him. But Yi Zui was actually not interested in the so-called treasure at all. What he was really interested in was only the sword. Swordsman. Sword supremacy. This was where his interest lay. For so many years, he hadn't met a sword supremacy who was similar to him. Yi Zui was unbearably lonely. Of course, although there were people who compared him to Bulu Qing, Yi Zui himself knew his own limits. With his cultivation, not to mention sparring with Bulu Qing, he probably wouldn't even be able to withstand a glance from Bulu Qing. Even if he asked Bulu Qing to suppress his cultivation level and fight with him, he would definitely die. Now that he had tracked the Third Elder all the way here, he actually inadvertently discovered the aura of a stranger, and to his surprise, discovered that this stranger was actually a sword supremacy. Second grade. This made Yi Zui feel as if a huge pie had fallen from the sky. Under such temptation, why would Yi Zui still care about the Third Elder? Everything could just be pushed to the back. With Chu Yang in front and Yi Zui behind, the two figures flew out of the forest like two shooting stars. Chu Yang had only flown 30 feet when he already felt a chill from the sword aura on his back. Obviously, the other party's speed was very fast. With a thought, a long sword immediately appeared and flashed across the sky. Clang! Clang! Almost at the same time, the two of them released their sword aura. The two swords let out a long cry at the same time. King against king. Sword aura entangled king against king, and victory had to be determined. There couldn't be two suns in the sky, and two rulers in a country, and there couldn't be a second king in the sword. This was an amazing feeling. At this moment, Yi Zui's face was full of fanaticism. He shouted, Third Elder, since it's already a king against king, are you still thinking of leaving? Stop in your tracks and fight with me. This sword of Chu Yang's was not a calamity sword. He had always been cautious. When facing a direct descendant of a big clan, unless absolutely necessary, he would not use the calamity sword. Although this sword was not a calamity sword, under Chu Yang's forging, it was much stronger than ordinary so-called divine swords. At this moment, He also felt the sword aura in his heart surging. Hearing this, he actually agreed without hesitation. All right, such a battle between sword supremacies had only happened a few times in the entire heavens world, since ancient times. This was a battle between swordsmen, and only such a battle could truly allow a swordsman to grow sufficiently. Chu Yang couldn't help but think of Gu Duxing. If Gu Duxing was here, he would probably fight with him for this battle even if he had to risk his life, right? To Yi Zui, this battle was a dream come true. To Gu Duxing, he had probably longed for it for a long time as well. But to Chu Yang, it was exactly what he wished for. Chu Yang was also a sword supremacy. Yi Zui wanted to improve himself, but Chu Yang was even more eager to do so than Yi Zui. Chu Yang thought of Gu Duxing, and his sword of solitude, and sword of oblivion. Chu Yang did a somersault in the air. Sword aura shot out from all over his body as he floated down. At the same time as he landed, he lowered his gaze. He lowered his head and lowered his head. He was completely immersed in the world of the sword. It was not a calamity sword, but Chu Yang could clearly feel this sword's joy, anger, sorrow, and joy, as well as the strong desire to fight as if it had met its match. That was the absolute exhilaration of a sudden release of extreme thirst and pain that could not be obtained. At the same time as he landed, opposite him, Yi Zui retreated at the same time, giving him a safe space to land. This was like the tacit understanding between two swords, giving each other ample respect. Yi Zui held the sword in his right hand, holding it horizontally in front of his chest. He raised his left index finger and gently brushed it across the body of the sword. His movements were gentle, and his gaze was passionate and persistent. However, he did not look at his opponent, but at the sword in his hand. His gaze actually contained endless love. It was the kind of enchantment that was like caressing the skin of his beloved. He had no feelings for anyone in the world except for the sword, but it was filled with a passion that went deep into his soul. At this moment, Yi Zui acted as if there was no one else around. Chu Yang's heart trembled. There are countless heavenly layer experts, but a battle between sword supremacies is rarely seen since ancient times. Yi Zui's gaze was focused on the sword. You are extraordinary and also a sword supremacy. To be able to have today's battle, it is for both of us. It is a gift from the heavens. Chu Yang smiled strangely. Why are you not calling me third elder anymore? Yi Zui still did not raise his head. He said indifferently, a name is just a title. What I call you will not change the fact of this battle. In that case, I will call you Dog Shit Yi. How about that? Chu Yang asked sarcastically. That works too. Yi Zui did not even raise his head. As long as you can fight with me. Chu Yang's heart trembled. This person is crazy. However, he burst into laughter. But you don't think so? If this battle is a battle between martial artists, it can be said that it doesn't matter. But as a battle between swordsmen, don't you think it is unfair? It is indeed unfair. I am 2 grades higher than you. Yi Zui said indifferently. Of course I will suppress my strength to the same level as yours. A sword supremacy at the peak of 2nd grade will fight with you. In a battle between swordsmen, the most important thing was to be fair. This was the rule ever since the Tribulation Sword Master took control of the heavens. In a battle between other grades, one could use schemes and tricks, poison. Even if a supreme martial artist fought against a martial king, no one would say anything. Strength was respected. One could use all the sinister methods one could think of. But as long as one was a swordsman, it would be a fair battle. This swordsman started from the sword sovereign. The higher one went, the stricter the hierarchy. A proud swordsman, a proud sword. Yi Zui suppressed his strength to the peak of 2nd grade supreme martial artist. But he was still much higher than the current Chu Yang. But Chu Yang did not say that it was unfair, because he himself knew that the aura he was releasing now, in Yi Zui's perception, was definitely that of a peak 2nd grade. But in reality, Chu Yang was only a beginner 2nd grade. Regarding this, other than being speechless, Chu Yang was still speechless. This was originally used to show off, but in today's battle between swordsmen, it was a huge disadvantage. Yi Zui lowered his head and said, "Let me give you time to prepare." Chu Yang said sternly, "Raise your head." Yi Zui suddenly raised his head. At the same time, the two of them did the same action. They puffed out their chests, raised their heads, and as though a spring humming sound came from their backs, they suddenly straightened up. If their previous posture was that of a sword in its scabbard, then at this moment, their swords were already out of the scabbard. Yizue placed his sword in front of his chest, then spread it out and straightened it, the tip of the sword pointing at Chu Yang's glabella. Chu Yang did the same action. A battle between swordsmen. Chapter 1308. This difference was a fundamental one. One controlled the sword, while the other controlled the sword. It might not be very obvious now, but once their grades were raised to a certain level, this difference could directly determine life and death. Because a person controlling the sword was a god, a sword controlling the person was a demon. A demon sword. A ray of light flashed. Chu Yang raised his sword and went straight forward. His feet slid forward. His entire person suddenly became lonely and desolate as he slid forward, as if he was the only one left in the world. The sword of solitude. Even if Gu Duxing was at the side, he would probably also mistakenly think that he had used this move himself. Yizue's gaze didn't waver. He shouted, "Good sword intent. Take my sword of drunken dreams." With a flash of sword light, Yizue's black clothes suddenly blurred. A dreamy and somewhat drunken sword intent spread out. The sword intent of solitude was still lonely in drunken dreams. The two swords suddenly each gave off thousands of rays of cold light. At the same time, both of them launched their attacks. It was already early in the morning, but at this moment, sword light scattered and filled the sky above their heads, shining even brighter than the stars in the night sky. Both of them turned into smoke. With just a floating movement in the air, a series of afterimages appeared. However, there were no afterimages of the swords at all. The swords had already turned into sword light and sword aura, surging and rampaging. At this moment, sword aura shot into the sky. Smack! After exchanging several blows, the two swords finally clashed for the first time. With one clash, both of them staggered and retreated backward. The sword aura in the air lost control and exploded with a bang. Like a bomb exploding, it spread out in the dense forest. With a swoosh, all the trees within a radius of several hundred feet were turned into powder under this surging sword aura. Before the sword aura dissipated completely, the two sword lights were already entangled with each other again. The previous attack was only considered a probing attack. But this time, it was a real battle. A ball of sword aura that was like a dream, like mist, like smoke and clouds spread toward Chu Yang. Chu Yang's sword shook. A wave of lonely sword aura blocked the pass. In an instant, Yizue had already circled around him 17 to 18 times. His sword came from every direction, from top to bottom. From the north, south, east, front, back, left, right, top of the head and bottom of the feet, he attacked fiercely. It had turned into a cloud of smoke and was everywhere. Chu Yang's body was as tall and straight as a sword. His sword hand was impenetrable. Different situations call for different measures. They would only defend and never attack. The sound of clanking and clanking rang out. Every time the two swords clashed, there would be balls of sword chi bursting out. In the blink of an eye, the entire forest was riddled with holes. A human figure quietly appeared in the shadows several hundred feet behind them. It seemed to glance in their direction before swiftly leaving in a flash. It was the third elder. Yizue had clearly seen it. However, he ignored Chu Yang's warning. Instead, he brandished his sword and attacked Chu Yang. "Hey, the person you're chasing has already run away. So what if he ran away? Now no one is more important than you." It was not easy to have a fair duel between two swordsmen, but he met a lunatic. Chu Yang was very depressed. He braced himself and dealt with it with all his might. It only took an instant for Yizue's figure to transform from turning into a cloud of smoke to directly turning into a cloud of smoke. Chu Yang closed his eyes and brandished his sword. He could feel the vibrations of the sword. Every time the sword vibrated, it was when the sword came into contact with the other party's sword. In just a short period of time, Chu Yang had already withstood no less than 3,000 attacks. If it were an ordinary swordsman, this frequency would be enough to throw his shoulders and arms away from his body when he swung his sword. However, the frequency of Yizue's attacks was still increasing. Chu Yang's situation gradually became unfavorable. because as the other party's attacks became faster and faster, he realized that he actually could not keep up with the other party's rhythm. Although the other party was fighting with suppressed cultivation, he still had a real foundation. However, he was still a genuine fourth-grade sword supremacy. As long as he could not keep up with the other party's rhythm, then in the blink of an eye, his body would become a beehive. As Chuyang blocked, his mind was racing. He suddenly thought of a saying, "Iron walls and bronze walls fight until the end." Iron walls and bronze walls? Chuyang's heart skipped a beat. He no longer defended passively. He suddenly abandoned Gu Duxing's sword of solitude and drew out a light screen with a circle of sword light. With a shake of his sword, a galaxy of stars appeared in front of him. Iron walls and bronze walls. Like a whirlwind, Yi Zue circled Chuyang several hundred times in an instant. His sword light had already connected into one, but not even a corner of the other party's clothes was touched. It was obvious that the other party was already at a complete disadvantage. There was a nagging feeling, just a little more and the other party would be done for. But even after a little more and a little more, the other party was still in a precarious situation, but was still holding on bitterly. Yi Zue shouted, "You want to exhaust me? Even though I have suppressed my cultivation, my real cultivation is still there. You won't be able to exhaust me." Chuyang chuckled. "Just you wait." He was repeatedly executing the first half of the move Iron Walls and Bronze Walls fight until the end. However, his comprehension was getting deeper and deeper. Under the other party's storm-like attacks, Chuyang could more and more comprehend the wonders of this move. He couldn't help but think of a saying, "Only when an opponent who is stronger than you is attacking you at full force can your potential be squeezed out. Only then can you see your own inadequacies." This saying was applicable to all aspects. A smile appeared on Chuyang's face. Even though he was retreating step by step, compared to the precarious situation just now, it was already much better. Yi Zue frowned. Suddenly, he let out a long laugh and flew 30 feet away. Chuyang took 3 steps back and stood up abruptly, panting heavily. It was just a blink of an eye earlier, but Chuyang could already feel his fatigue. Yi Zue said coldly, "Why didn't you attack? Under my attacks, if you only defend, you will definitely die." Chuyang said dispassionately, "When it's time to attack, I will naturally attack." A fervent look appeared in Yi Zue's eyes. "I will wait for your attack. Even though this defensive move of yours is amazing, it is not omnipotent. Watch my demon sealing sword." Brandishing his sword, he suddenly leaped into the air and shouted, "The extraterrestrial demon is right in front of you. Ants like you should just wait for death." Chuyang smiled bitterly in his heart. "Damn it. Everyone says that I am an extraterrestrial demon. I think you are much more like one than me." But just as this thought came to his mind, he felt an evil, almost perverted sword wind descending from the sky. It carried a cold aura of slaughtering everything. In an instant, it actually sealed off his front, back, left, and right. At this moment, it was as if he was standing naked all by himself in a world of ice and snow. Chuyang drew his sword and shouted, "Wind and cloud, green sky." He had executed the first half of the gathering of the clouds and clouds. The sword slashed apart that inexplicable seal in front of him and met the other party's sword. In an instant, Yi Zue's figure suddenly disappeared. It had completely disappeared. There was only one sword left in the world. A sword that had already been demonized. It carried with it a boundless devouring aura. It carried with it a boundless evil. Chuyang brandished his sword wildly. In this moment, under the pressure of life and death, countless sword moves automatically appeared in his mind. Without thinking, all of them surged out from his hands. The various sword techniques in the land of legacy of the first-generation Tribulation Sword Master. Luo Kadi's sword techniques, Gu Duxing's sword techniques, Jimo's sword techniques, Aoshian's sword techniques, even Bulioqing's sword techniques, they suddenly appeared. But that demonized sword ignored them. It just followed behind Chuyang like a maggot. As long as Chuyang showed any weakness, it would be able to capture it immediately and attack. As everyone knew, no matter how intricate a sword move was, it was impossible to not have any weakness at all. But this set of demonic swords of Yi Zue targeted the weaknesses of all sword moves. It didn't care what sword technique you used, how intricate or simple it was. It only attacked your weakness. Besides, Chu Yang had a vague feeling that it wasn't Yi Zui who was attacking now. Or rather, Yi Zui had already become one with the sword and was attacking instinctively. And this instinct was an instinct that most people were inclined towards the sword, and not Yi Zui's instinct. Chu Yang finally understood what the sword spirit meant by the demonic sword. The sword itself wasn't a demon, but once a sword cultivator entered the demonic path, he was even more terrifying than a sword demon. In just an instant, bloodstains had already appeared on Chu Yang's body. In the face of such an all-pervasive attack, it was as if mercury was flowing down the ground. Even Chu Yang had a feeling of being overwhelmed, and he definitely couldn't use the complete tribulation sword technique. Chu Yang roared. His sword suddenly slowed down from fast to slow. He drew a circle, and the internal energy in his body also followed suit. At this moment, he subconsciously used his soft water sword intent. This was Chu Yang's instinctive move in the face of the other party's stormy attacks. The moment he made the move, he instantly cursed inwardly. The other party's attacks were so dense and fast. If he used this slow soft water sword intent, wouldn't he be sending his life to the other party's hands? But the next moment Chu Yang was dumbfounded. Under the guidance of the soft water sword intent, the other party's violent attacks actually followed the soft water sword intent and circled around half a circle before returning to the starting point. This demon sealing sword actually couldn't do anything to the soft water sword intent. Chu Yang was shocked. Then he finally understood. This demon sealing sword was looking for the weakness. Any sword move had a weakness, but only this sword intent formed from the flow of water had no weakness. The flow of water was eternal. As long as the water was still flowing, it was one from top to bottom. No matter how fast or slow it was one. Who had ever seen a flow of water that was cut in half by a sword? Using the sword tip to find the weakness of the flowing water itself. How could he find it? Thinking of this, Chu Yang suddenly felt a burst of joy in his heart. He almost looked up to the sky and laughed. Because at this moment, he clearly knew that the soft water sword intent that he had created was finally close to the realm of great success today. Next, Chu Yang's sword moved to the east and west. The sword intent was like flowing water, soft and continuous. Before the power of the first sword dissipated, the power of the second sword arrived. It didn't seem hurried at all. There was no killing intent at all. But it protected his body tightly. The other party's demon-like attacks were completely ineffective. Originally, I thought that continuous outbursts were a painful thing. Now I say saving chapters is the painful thing. It's too painful. There's no one to comment on it. There's no motivation at all. This is my habit. After I finish writing a chapter, I go everywhere to read the book reviews. Whether it's scolding or praising me, I'll read it once. Then, I'll fly into a rage or be happily narcissistic for a while. So I'll write a chapter. Chapter 1309. Chu Yang was like a small boat in the middle of raging waves, going up with the wind and waves, and then falling down with the wind and waves. But no matter how big the wind and waves were, they couldn't completely drown this small boat. Chu Yang's mind was clear, forgetting everything. He just went along with the other party's sword momentum and used the soft water sword intent. In fact, he didn't even need to use any moves. But it formed a flawless defense. If the other party's sword is raging waves, raging winds and torrential rain, and I only have a bend of clear water here, Chu Yang thought. But, can't I attack with just a bend of clear water? If I'm a river, what will happen when faced with a storm? That's not right. If I'm a river, then the wind and rain should be increasing my strength. Whether it's rain or snow or fog, they should only increase my strength. Realization suddenly rose in Chu Yang's mind. The next moment, his sword technique changed again. It became acceptance. The next moment, poof poof poof, Chu Yang let out a loud cry and rolled 100 feet away. Just this change in technique had added more than 10 wounds all over his body. If he hadn't dodged quickly, his entire left leg would have been cut off. A cruel look appeared in Yi Zui's eyes. The demonic sword pierced straight through the air, stabbing viciously toward Chu Yang's heart. Chu Yang rolled on the ground pathetically and jumped up. The long swords clashed and a strong vibration came. Xu Yang was sent flying 100 feet away again. And the other party's sword was already in front of him. From the beginning to the end, Xu Yang didn't even have time to take the heavy pill. Extremely helpless, Xu Yang could only use the soft water sword intent again to stabilize the situation. But he was puzzled. What I guess was definitely not wrong. This should be the case. But why did I receive a heavy blow the moment I did this? The clanging sounds of the long swords clashing became more and more frequent. Evidently, the other party's sword momentum was getting faster and faster. Xu Yang let out a muffled snort. He fell back again. However, it was this collision that allowed him to suddenly understand. That's right. So that's how it was. A small stream could withstand a storm. But if the storm was too big, it would destroy the stream. If the soft water of the brook were to lose its dam, it would vanish without a trace. His current position was a small stream. If he didn't move, no matter how the other party attacked, he would still be a small stream. However, if he overestimated himself and opened a source to accept other water sources, it would depend on his own capacity. The current Yi Zui was equivalent to another small stream, or a small river, or a big river. He only had the capacity of a small stream, and could not contain the other party. In that case, it could only be destroyed by the other party. So now, when he used the soft water sword intent, he could only defend, but not attack. At the very least, before it grew into a huge river, it couldn't attack. A big river could already accommodate small streams, but it still couldn't accommodate another big river. If he wanted to use this kind of sword art to attack and injure people, or even people who were higher than him, he would need to use it to attack. Then at the very least, he wanted to become a boundless ocean. In this way, no matter what, they would be in an invincible position, and they would be able to counterattack at any time. It was the same even if the enemy was stronger than him. The ocean had its own hurricanes and waves. The stronger the other party's attack, the bigger the storm. But this was something that neither a river nor a stream could achieve. At the thought of this, Xu Yang's mind calmed down at once. He believed that he had already found a path to heaven. Right now, walking on this path, he could only protect himself and not be invaded by external forces. This was enough. But when he grew up, he could rely on this ocean to drown any enemy. Sword light flashed everywhere. Yi Zui fought in a carefree manner, but he also felt extremely depressed. In the battle with the sword sovereign, that omnipresent sword intent had indeed benefited him a lot. But the most depressing thing was that the other party didn't attack at all. The other party was completely suppressed by him. This made Yi Zui extremely uncomfortable. You don't attack me, you don't attack. Even if I can comprehend something, it's still very limited. But why don't you attack? You clearly have the power to attack. Of course, Yi Zui didn't know that it was his unreasonable and barbaric attack this time that allowed the world to have another set of truly invincible swords. From the start of this battle until now, he hadn't been injured at all and had benefited a lot. The other party seemed to be covered in injuries, but the benefits he had gained were something that he couldn't even dream of. If Yi Zui had obtained a gold ingot then, Xu Yang had obtained a national treasury in this battle. How much gold was there in the national treasury? Let's end this. Yi Zui let out a long howl. Since you refuse to attack, then die. Demonic sword slaughters the heavens. A fierce roar. Monstrous demonic flames suddenly spread out and filled the world. This sword move was completely one with the sword as the lead. A true demonic sword. Xu Yang let out a clear cry and shouted, "The mortal world is the path of heartlessness, slaying all in the world without retracting the blade." All of a sudden, the soft water sword intent was completely retracted. What followed after was a vast and mighty murderous intent. All of Yi Zui's tactics were to deal with his soft water sword intent. Now he had also found a way to deal with the soft water sword intent. To use the most violent attack to break the other party's defenses. Just like a river suddenly pouring into a river from all directions. It could break through in an instant. His strategy was completely correct. But he didn't expect that the other party would actually give up on that flawless defense at this moment, and suddenly turn to attack. All of his strength was focused on one point, and pierced toward him. Like a thunderbolt, the sword pierced straight through the sword light of Yi Zui's demonic sword. With just one strike, It pierced Yizue's right chest. Heaven and earth suddenly came to a standstill. Blood splattered. Dozens of sword wounds on Chu Yang's body spurted blood at the same time. This was caused by the final attack. The injuries looked horrifying, but they weren't fatal. His sword. It stopped at Yizue's chest and pierced 3 inches into his flesh. But it was a fatal move. Chu Yang didn't advance. Instead, he took 2 steps back and pulled out his sword. A look of disbelief appeared in Yizue's eyes. As if struck by lightning, his body suddenly froze. A complicated expression appeared on Yizue's face. Why didn't you use force? You could have killed me with 1 strike. Wouldn't it have been clean? Chu Yang shook his head and said hoarsely, "Why should I kill you? Besides, I can't kill you either." Yizue's eyes revealed the viciousness of a vulture. "Oh." Chu Yang shook his head. "You are a 4th grade peak level expert. If my sword were to go any further, it wouldn't be able to break through your defense. The battle between swordsmen. It ends here for today." Yizue pondered for a moment. "If you were to pierce in and I would counterattack and resist with all my might, you would definitely die. But even though I won't die, I will also become a cripple henceforth. Alright, you've won this battle. I'm not your match in a battle of the same level." Chu Yang smiled. Straightforward. Although he said it beautifully, the truth was far from it. The reason why he didn't pierce in, it wasn't because he couldn't kill Yizue at all. Taking advantage of Yizue's underestimation of his opponent, Chu Yang could have used the sword intent silently and killed this dangerous enemy completely. And if he did that, Yizue wouldn't have a chance to counterattack at all. The real reason was that Chu Yang this time. He wanted to enter the Yi clan in the first place. A sword maniac like Yizue was an excellent springboard. How could Chu Yang let go of such an opportunity? In Chu Yang's opinion, this battle was a bright path to entering the Yi clan. But another reason was that a sword supremacy like Yizue, in Chu Yang's opinion, was a whetstone for Gu Duxing. If Gu Duxing couldn't fight him, he would probably regret it for the rest of his life. "It's too much of a waste for you to die now. If you want to die, please die under my brother's sword." Yizue snorted and said, "I won't accept your kindness either. Even though this sword of yours didn't hurt my internal organs, the crisscrossing sword aura still caused me quite a bit of damage. Your injuries are all superficial, but you bastard's last sword strike actually hurt my muscles and bones." Chu Yang said frankly, "If I don't hurt you, what should I do if you go back on your words after the battle?" Yizue burst into laughter. Actually, this was exactly what he had in mind. After this battle, regardless of victory or defeat, he would immediately show his true cultivation and kill this person. What rules of the sword? How could he care so much about that? But it was no longer feasible now. Chu Yang's sword strike had hurt his muscles and nerves. Even if he regained his 4th grade cultivation and forcefully wielded his sword, it would also cause him to not be able to recover for a long time. In serious cases, he might even be handicapped for life. Both of them were exhausted after fighting until now. Chu Yang was truly exhausted. Even though Yizue wasn't at this level, his injuries weren't much better either. They sat on the ground and smiled at each other. But both of them knew in their hearts that there was absolutely no appreciation for each other. Yizue still wanted to kill Chu Yang, and Chu Yang also didn't have any good intentions toward Yizue. But on the surface, both of them were smiling kindly, as if they were afraid that the other party couldn't sense their appreciation for each other. "Great," Yizue smiled. "What's your name? That defensive stance of yours was truly amazing." After a pause, he continued, "Especially when you suddenly appeared after a full defensive stance and decided the outcome with 1 strike. That was even more miraculous. I'm impressed." The logic behind this was very simple. Just like table tennis, if one were to blindly slice the ball for the entire game, and then suddenly hit the board hard, even the world champion would probably be stunned in an instant. Of course, it was easy to say, but how difficult was it to actually do it? Chu Yang was about to answer when a sneering laugh suddenly rang out. The voice definitely wasn't far away. It was only within a few hundred feet. Both of their countenances changed abruptly. There was absolutely no kindness in this laughter. It was obviously an enemy. Moreover, he should have been prepared since a long time ago, and only approached them abruptly after the battle ended. Both of them were engrossed in the battle just now. One was a sword maniac, while the other was pressured so much that he didn't have the time to care about anything else. After the battle ended, both of them heaved a sigh of relief. Of course, they weren't very vigilant of their surroundings. But to be able to approach them in such a short period of time wasn't something that an ordinary person could do. From this, it could be seen that the person who came was definitely no ordinary person. Now that both of them were seriously injured, the situation was extremely bad. After midnight, it would be a hand-to-hand battle with double the monthly votes. Are you ready, G? Chapter 13:10. Yi Zue's face became extremely ugly. Obviously he knew who this person was. Only Chu Yang was more or less confused. This was already the Yi clan's territory. Was there anyone who dared to attack the Grand Duke of the Yi clan here? A voice said, "Nice to meet you, Brother Yi. I didn't expect to see you here again. This person in front of you must be the third elder of the Divine Clan? This is really a pleasant surprise for me." Another voice said, "Yes, I'm also so surprised that my eyeballs almost popped out. Big Brother Yi, what's wrong with you? Why are you sitting on the ground? Can it be that you can't move?" Yi Zue snorted coldly and said sarcastically, "I was wondering who it was. So it's Zhuge Han. Haha, the third elder has stayed in your house for so long. Can't you tell if this is the third elder or not? As for you, Lan Meng, do you think you are qualified to talk to me like this?" Chu Yang was shocked. He immediately knew who had come. It was actually the Grand Duke of the Zhuge clan, Zhuge Han, and the second young master of the Long clan, Lan Meng. Zhuge Han, the leader of the younger generation of the Zhuge clan, was known as Zhuge Han. It was said that his ability to plan was not inferior to the older generation of the Zhuge clan. It was indeed extraordinary. The name Zhuge Han originally meant a scholar who could see through the mysteries of the heavens. But every time Chu Yang heard this nickname, he felt like having diarrhea. Zhuge Han. As the name suggests, could it be that Mo Tianji secretly came up and gave birth to him after he did that? The previous voice was obviously Zhuge Han. He said calmly, "Brother Yi, you don't have to worry about this. Haha, I can still recognize the third elder. If I say he's the third elder, he's the third elder. If I say he's not, then he's not. Now I say he is." Chu Yang was dumbfounded. He didn't expect to be labeled as the third elder of the Divine Clan just like this. At this moment, the feeling in his heart was incomparably wonderful. The real third elder is probably already hundreds of miles away from this place by now. But this group of people is grabbing me and calling me the third elder. Do I look like someone from the 3 Stars Divine Clan? Damn it, if Tan Tan was here, it would make sense. Chu Yang cursed in his heart. Then he discovered one thing. The archdukes of these great families all had a common special ability. That was referring to a deer as a horse, lying through his teeth, as if it was the truth. His face was not red, and his breath was not out of breath. He was elegant and graceful, including Yi Zue in front of him, Zhuge Han who had just arrived, and Lan Rua who had been killed by him in the lower 3 heavens. Yi Zue sneered. Zhuge Han. It was just that he was excited by the prospect. It was fine as long as he said it out loud. Your Zhuge family has suffered heavy casualties. You do need to replenish your forces. Zhuge Han smiled calmly. What Brother Yi said makes sense. Not only do we have to replenish the strength of our own family, we need to weaken the power of other clans. Brother Yi, don't you think so? On the side, Lan Meng sneered. Big Brother Yi, how did you manage to survive? This is the territory of your Yi clan. You were actually left alone in your own territory. You were even chased by our 2 clans. It can be seen that this person has a lifetime of opportunities. Yi Zue said coldly. Even your boss Lan Rua wouldn't dare to let out half a fart in front of me. Lan Meng, who do you think you are? Do you believe that I can let you die here if you say another word? The 2 4th-grade supreme martial artists. Beside, you won't be able to protect you under my full force attack. This sentence was full of murderous intent. Lan Meng shrank his neck. His eyes were filled with rage, but he really didn't dare to say another word. He understood that if Yi Zue really wanted to kill him, at the risk of perishing together with him, then the 2 4th-grade supreme martial artists beside him really wouldn't be able to stop him. Even though Yi Zue was already injured now, they still wouldn't be able to stop him. Zhuge Han stepped forward and said, "Brother Yi, we are all good brothers." He could say and do whatever he wanted to do. "Don't worry. I just want to invite Brother Yi to visit my house. We can meet each other day and night, talk about martial arts, and enjoy the beautiful scenery of the four seasons. As for this third elder, he is a great opportunity for my clan. Brother Yi, please don't blame us." Yi Zui just sneered. "Zhuge Han, you actually didn't mention your purpose for strolling around the Yi clan's territory during this period of time. But no one in the Yi clan made things difficult for you, right? Why, seeing that I'm alone and injured today, you want to take advantage of me?" Zhuge Han said. "Brother Yi, what are you talking about? Although I didn't say my purpose, didn't Brother Yi also guess that I'm here to hunt down the third elder? Otherwise, why would Brother Yi be here today?" Yi Zui frowned and said maliciously, "I see. You deliberately hid it, but I guessed it. So you want to make use of me to find the third elder for you." Zhuge Han sighed. "Brother Yi, you're so smart. You're right. Although our Zhuge family is powerful, and the people we sent out this time are all masters, we're not as powerful as the Yi family at the center of the continent. Besides, our Zhuge clan can only predict the future. In terms of tracking skills, we are far inferior to the Yi clan's Yi Laixiang." Yi Zui suddenly felt as if his chest was blocked. He was so angry that his face turned red. "Zhuge Han, you are indeed a descendant of the Zhuge clan. You are indeed sinister to a certain extent," Zhuge Han said apologetically. "Brother Yi, it's better to be sinister than to die openly. I'm really sorry." Chu Yang turned his head and saw a group of men in green and a group of men in blue standing not far away. The leader of the men in green was tall and handsome. His face was like jade, and his eyebrows were slanted to his temples. The expression on his face was gentle and elegant, just like a learned and gentle young man. The leader of the men in blue was a young man. He looked about the same age as Lan Chang'e, and his face was also somewhat similar. There were 7 to 8 people behind each of them. Chu Yang sighed in his heart. "I originally wanted to control Yi Zui and sneak into the Yi clan to find the place where the second section of the sword is hidden. I didn't expect that just when I was about to succeed, 2 big clans actually came to make trouble together. Aren't they trying to force me to my death?" Looking at these people, the lowest level of cultivation is a first-grade supreme martial artist. And there are 2 fourth-grade supreme martial artists in each of them. What to say? Since the other party was so brazen, they must have people outside. Since they attacked Yi Zui, then they must have absolute confidence. Otherwise, why would they dare to attack the Grand Duke of the Yi clan in the Yi clan's territory? Seeing Chu Yang turn his head, Zhuge Han smiled kindly. "Third elder, we haven't seen each other for 3 months. You've actually recovered so well, and can even severely injure Brother Yi Zui of the Yi clan. You really surprised me." Chu Yang touched his nose. Extremely speechless. "I say, Zhuge Han, look at me. How do I look like the third elder you mentioned?" Zhuge Han looked at him seriously. Suddenly, he laughed and said, "Third elder, you must be joking with me." Chu Yang sighed and murmured, "It's really time for the Zhuge clan to be disbanded. The first successor of the clan is actually seeing things." Yi Zui laughed. Zhuge Han said lightly, "It's okay if third elder doesn't admit it, as long as you're back. You've been away for 3 months. Everyone in the clan misses you very much." He waved and shouted, "Take him down." "Wait." Yi Zui stood up. "Zhuge Han, give me a reason." Zhuge Han was silent for a while and said lightly, "Brother Yi, Yi Shifeng is already dead. We don't know what happened to Yi Shiyu now. He's disheartened and unable to recover from the setback. Among the first 3 dukes of the Yi clan, only you are still supporting the overall situation." Yi Zui nodded slowly. "So, as long as I'm gone, the Yi clan will have no successor for a very long time. Brother Yi is indeed far-sighted." Zhuge Han smiled and said, "However, the main reason is not because of this." Yi Zui said, "Oh." Zhuge Han said lightly, "Brother Yi, it's indeed an accident that we didn't expect that third elder could escape. But after he escaped, we intentionally increased the blockade on several other areas, so that he could only escape to this side. And let him meet up with the people who came to pick him up. And I at the same time came here. Brother Yi, it's all for you. An accident led to a premeditated plan. Perhaps it's also heaven's will. Zhuge Han smiled gracefully and bowed slightly. Brother Yi, please forgive me. Yi Zui took a deep breath. In other words, your target from the beginning was actually me? Why? Zhuge Han smiled. Not entirely. Third Elder is also a very important target. But according to the guidance of fate, this third elder in front of Brother Yi is more important. And Brother Yi yourself is no different from these two people. As for the reason, when Brother Yi arrives at Zhuge clan's Tianji city, I'll definitely give it all to you. Zhuge Han said elegantly. Brother Yi, there's no need to trouble yourself. You're a sword supremacy. Even with divine medicine, you won't be able to recover in a short time after being injured by the sword energy. Yi Zui's expression changed. Chu Yang asked, I have a question. Why am I more important? Do you know who I am? Zhuge Han stared at him and smiled. My Zhuge clan offered the souls of 3 ancestors to calculate your identity. Although I don't know your origin, you have a great relationship with my Zhuge clan. If you're in the Zhuge clan, the Zhuge clan will be fine. If you're not, the Zhuge clan will be uncertain. He finally stopped thinking that Chu Yang was the third elder. But this sentence also clearly meant that he would not let Chu Yang go no matter what. Don't ask me why. Because fate has given such an instruction. Zhuge Han was very patient and graceful as he explained. Chu Yang said angrily, It's unreasonable. You don't even know who I am, or what I look like. How dare you do such an absurd thing? It's totally unreasonable. Zhuge Han said lightly, One night in the sky, the tiger is in the plains and the dragon is in the sky. Drunken dreams are filled with pain. Falling into fate, one will be safe. He smiled lightly and said, This is the leak of heavenly secrets that the 3 ancestors exchanged their lives for back then. Being together with Yi Zui and harming Yi Zui's people is related to the safety of the Heavenly Secrets clan. Sir, do you understand now? It will start to erupt at midnight. Gee, see you at midnight, everyone. Chapter 13:11. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. The Zhuge clan's prediction of heavenly secrets was indeed amazing. At a time when heavenly secrets were blurred and couldn't be seen clearly, they could actually predict such things accurately. In fact, even Zhuge Han didn't dare to confirm the true meaning of these words. He wasn't sure if they were right or not. But Chu Yang knew that they were right. As long as he was caught and brought into the Zhuge clan, or assimilated by the Zhuge clan, then the Zhuge clan would be safe. Completely correct. Because he was the Tribulation Sword Master. One night in the sky, the tiger in the plains and the dragon in the sky. These 2 sentences, the first one was about the position, and the second one was about Yi Zui and himself. Both of them were tigers in the plains. Or Yi Zui was a tiger in the plains. He was a dragon in the sky. Thinking of this, Chu Yang's face heated up. Drunken dreams were painful. Yi Zui was injured, falling into heavenly secrets and being safe. This should be the main purpose of Zhuge Han's visit? But this sentence was also a little vague. Would it be safe if he fell into heavenly secrets, or if he and Yi Zui both fell into heavenly secrets? Chu Yang sighed in his heart. This Zhuge clan was really generous. They were actually willing to use the lives of 3 elders in exchange for a prediction of heavenly secrets. But he didn't know that the Zhuge clan was even more helpless. First, there was the medicine banquet which turned the entire clan upside down. Then, there was the slaying of Tao battle, which reduced the overall high-end strength of the Zhuge clan by half. And there was also the matter of the Tribulation Sword Master coming up. The Zhuge clan was in a terrible fix and overwhelmed. All the high-level experts went into seclusion, preparing to increase their strength as much as they could before the battle. But at this time, the third elder of the sacred race, who had been on the brink of death, suddenly broke out of the prison, brimming with vitality. This was bad. The high-level experts were all in seclusion and weren't prepared for this at all. They actually let the third elder meet up with the divine clan, who had been waiting to receive him, and rush out of the Zhuge clan. Then the Zhuge clan really panicked. Once the third elder returned, the divine clan would take revenge on a large scale. They were preparing for a large-scale chase. Suddenly they received news. The Li clan was making a large-scale move. It was suspected that the Tribulation Sword Master had appeared. This was truly a case of a leaky roof being hit by continuous rain, a broken boat encountering headwinds. The Zhuge clan was at a loss for a moment. Thus, Zhuge Tsangqiong risked the backlash of the heavenly secrets and made a divination. The divination showed that within 3 years, Zhuge Tsangqiong would die. Thus, the Zhuge family became even more panicked. In order to save the clan, the 3 middle-level supreme ancestors sacrificed their cultivation that transcended the boundary between immortal and mortal, sacrificed their lives, and used their souls and blood as a guide. He broke through the seal of heaven's secret. He wanted to find a way to survive. Yet they had found such an inexplicable path. And then the 3 ancestors had passed away. The Zhuge clan was also confused. What was going on? How could such an insignificant person decide the life and death of the Zhuge family, with just a few inexplicable words? He was still doubtful. It was better to believe it than not to believe it at all. As a result, the Zhuge family made large-scale arrangements and mobilized all forces to prevent the sacred race elder from being caught. Instead, he was used as bait to rush into the Yi clan's territory. At the same time, Zhuge Han shouldered a heavy responsibility and came to the Yi clan. After spending time with Yi Zue, he pretended to accidentally leak some information. As the Grand Duke of the Yi clan, how intelligent was Yi Zue? With just a little leak, he had deduced the truth of the matter. Then he rushed ahead of Zhuge Han to hunt down the 3rd elder of the sacred race. This indicated that all these developments were carried out silently and methodically, according to the Zhuge family's strict budget, all the way until now. At this critical juncture, Chu Yang was chased out of the inn by Wu Jueqing and sped all the way. Hurried as a spark, he finally caught up. That prophecy of the Zhuge family, and Chu Yang finally succeeded in becoming one of the most important characters. Now that the 3 Cao Cao's case were facing each other, everyone was confused. But Yi Zue wanted to escape. Chu Yang wanted to escape, but Zhuge Han insisted on capturing the 2 of them together. It said that they would be safe once they fell into the heavenly secrets. But it didn't say that it was only this guy in front of him. The safest way was, of course, to capture the 2 of them together. The Yi clan was naturally powerful. The Zhuge family would never dare to provoke them normally. But now the Zhuge family would be gone in 3 years. Why would they care about the Yi clan? So, what was the big deal about attacking Yi Zue? This was the cause and effect of the matter. With this development, the 3rd elder of the sacred race, who was originally very important, was no longer noticed by anyone at this moment. This world was just so wonderful. As for the Long clan, it was a solid ally of the Zhuge family now. The Long clan was gradually declining, and lost more experts than any other clan. Left with no choice, they could only fully unite with the Zhuge family first. Zhuge Han looked at Chu Yang with a complicated gaze. Who exactly was this guy? Not only did he look sloppy, but he was also extremely filthy. Especially now, he was barefooted, and his whole body was covered with injuries. He looked like he only had 1 breath left. Chu Yang's face was covered with grease, and the filth on his body was still on his face. Especially now, he was dripping with blood. Of course, Zhuge Han couldn't recognize that this guy in front of him was Chu Yang, Minister Chu, who had once created chaos in Tianji City. Besides, he didn't have much contact with Chu Yang at that time. "Sir, who are you?" Zhuge Han asked. Chu Yang was silent for a moment, but didn't answer him. He only said lightly, "Archduke Zhuge, from what I heard, the 4 lines you said seem to be something like a poem. The Tianji Gatha seems to be a little incomplete. There should be a few lines that you haven't said, right?" Zhuge Han's expression changed instantly. He grinned. "Whether it's complete or incomplete, you will know everything when you reach Tianji City." Chu Yang pondered for a moment and said sincerely, "Going to the Zhuge family, and there's no danger to my life. Naturally, it's not a difficult thing. But can you give me some time to consider?" Zhuge Han was a little surprised, but still pretended to be generous. "Of course." Chu Yang lowered his head, because just now, he heard a voice as soft as a mosquito. "Let's rush out together." It was Yi Zue's voice. When Chu Yang looked, he saw that Yi Zue's lips were tightly shut, and he didn't move at all. He really didn't know how he could make a sound, and even condense it into a line to transmit his voice. But Chu Yang didn't have such ability. He could only lower his head, seeming to be deep in thought. But he asked subtly, "Rush out which way? How? Which side has a more complicated terrain?" Yi Zue's voice continued. "They still have a few 5th-grade supreme martial artists, but they didn't notice them at the side. They must be waiting outside. We can only bet on our luck." Chu Yang said, "We can't go in the direction of the Yi clan." Yi Zue said, "From here to the northeast, it's the continent's #1 divine mountain, Pagoda Mountain. The terrain here is the most complicated. Once we enter the mountain, we will have to take many turns. Even those who are familiar with the terrain may not be able to make it out. But for us now, only this place is safer. As for whether we can make it out in the future, we'll talk about it later." Chu Yang agreed. "Yes, stay alive first. How's your injury?" Yi Zue asked. "I'm worried about your injury." Chu Yang's voice had a hint of laughter. Yi Zue also smiled. "If that's the case, follow my gesture and we'll attack together. Don't seek to kill the enemy, just rush out first. Since the terrain over there is complicated, there must be experts lying in ambush," Chu Yang said. Yi Zue said, "If there is, we can only try our best. I can only fight with all my might. If I can make it, I'll be lucky. If I can't, I'll be doomed." Admiration welled up in Chu Yang's heart. As the Grand Duke of the Yi clan, although Yi Zue wasn't a good person, his open-mindedness and willingness to let go were indeed top-notch. But Chu Yang knew that they probably couldn't rush over there. With Zhuge Hun's means, since he appeared like this, he definitely had 100% confidence. Chu Yang even had Zhuge Han on him. He discovered the characteristics of Diwu Qingru and Mo Tianji. Of course, compared to these two, Zhuge Hun's obvious weakness was that he talked too much. Since that was the case, then when he reached the mountain, he'd find another opportunity. At least after breaking out of this siege, he'd have a wide world to explore. It might be easy for them to catch Yi Zue, but to catch him, it really wasn't that easy. "I've thought about it." Chu Yang looked up. Zhuge Han smiled lightly. "Oh, I can agree to go to the Zhuge clan, but I have a condition," Chu Yang said seriously. "What condition?" Although Zhuge Han was shrewd, he couldn't help but feel happy. "I don't agree," Yi Zue shouted. "If you want to go to the Zhuge clan, I'll kill you first. The Zhuge clan wants to deal with me. How can I allow you to help them? If you must die, let's all die together." Zhuge Han was slightly angry. He shouted, "Take Yi Zue down first." The order was given. 7 to 8 figures flew up at the same time. Yi Zue let out a shrill cry. Sword light flashed. Without dodging or avoiding, it actually pierced toward Chu Yang's back. Chu Yang was shocked and furious. He dodged and shouted, "Are you crazy?" Yi Zue snorted and shouted violently, "Let's all die together." He charged again. With a spin and a somersault, he had already condensed into a round sword light in midair. Like a long rainbow, it flew toward Chu Yang fiercely. Chu Yang's forehead was sweating. His leg that was seriously injured earlier didn't seem to be very agile. He was in an extremely sorry state. He shouted, You're crazy. What are you waiting for?" Before his voice died away, Yi Zue's sword light had already shot toward him. Chu Yang blocked with his sword, but didn't manage to. His chest and lower abdomen were immediately covered in blood. Under the intense pain, he let out a muffled groan and fell backward. Yi Zue roared like thunder and continued to attack, as if he wouldn't stop until he chopped this guy into minced meat. "Stop him." Zhuge Han was slightly puzzled. He added, "Be careful." However, although Zhuge Han thought that the other party might be trying to trick him, the few supreme martial artists who attacked didn't have the same brain as Zhuge Han. They only knew that this person in front of them was very important. Yi Zue wanted to kill him, so they had to protect him. They straightened their bodies and stood in front of Yi Zue. At this moment, sword energy rushed to the sky in front and behind them. The two sword supremes attacked at the same time. Chapter 13:12. This was really beyond everyone's expectations. Everyone had seen Yi Zue's combat power clearly. Of course, they knew that Yi Zue was not easy to deal with. But the wound on Yi Zue's chest was obviously caused by the sword aura, and it had injured his tendons. Under such circumstances, it was certain that Yi Zue would not be able to unleash his highest combat power. Yi Zue's current sword aura had confirmed everyone's guess. But what was really unexpected was definitely not Yi Zue, but Chu Yang. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that there were definitely no less than 50 wounds on this guy's body. Although they were all superficial wounds, for a sword supremacy like Yi Zue to be injured to this extent, he was probably on the verge of death. Moreover, the wound on his leg that had almost severed his leg was something that everyone could see. Even the few fourth-grade supreme martial artists unanimously agreed that if he were to fight forcefully, this person would definitely not be able to unleash even 20% of his usual combat power. Who would have thought that the moment he attacked, he would actually unleash more than 120% of his combat power? Even if he was not injured at all, it would be very difficult for him to do so. And not only that, this guy originally seemed to have wavered due to his heavy injuries. But in the blink of an eye, he had turned against them? In the blink of an eye, Yi Zue was in front of them, and Chu Yang was behind them. The two sword supremacies attacked with all their might at the same time, surrounding these few supreme martial artists in the blink of an eye. Sword aura rampaged, and before the three first-grade supreme martial artists could even let out a scream, they turned into flesh and blood. The two third-grade supreme martial artists spun and fell out, their bodies full of sword wounds. The two fourth-grade supreme martial artists finally stabilized their footing. They roared furiously and counterattacked with all their might. Bam bam! Chu Yang and Yi Zue struck with their palms at the same time. At the same time, they let out a muffled groan. There was a crack in Chu Yang's body, and some bones were broken, but the two of them finally joined together. In an instant the sword aura surged. Two great rivers converged into a torrent. It charged toward Zhuge Han and Lan Meng mightily. Zhuge Han let out a roar and attacked with all his might together with the other two beside him. This gentle-looking Zhuge clan Grand Duke was actually a first-grade supreme martial artist as well. All the experts from all directions pounced toward them at the same time. Chu Yang and Yi Zue shouted at the same time. Suddenly, the sword light changed direction abruptly. It endured the attacks of several masters with its body. At the same time, blood spurted out from its mouth. Finally it changed direction. It brushed past Zhuge Han's body and shot to one side. On the other side, Lan Ming wanted to watch the show. In the blink of an eye, the two sword lights merged into one and rushed towards him like a bolt of lightning. For a moment, he couldn't help but feel as if his soul had left his body. His entire body was ice cold, and he almost cried out, "Quickly save!" However, the guards beside him had just moved and rushed over to stop him. It was too late to come back now. The next moment, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the second Duke of the Lan clan let out a blood-curdling scream, and his entire body suddenly shattered into pieces. The two dukes of the Lan clan were rather pitiful. Normally, they were always suppressed by Lan Rua. Now that Lan Rua was not around, they could finally come out for a spin. Just like that, he lost his life. The other clans were fine, but the Lan clan's first Duke Lan Rua and second Duke Lan Meng were the only ones affected. The three men Lan Chang'e were all dead. Just like what Yi Zue had said earlier, there was no one left to carry on his legacy. Chu Yang was also rather black-hearted. Until today the Lan clan, which was one of the major clans, had already lost 4 dukes to him alone. And they were all ranked at the top. Once Lan Meng died, there was an opening. Chu Yang and Yi Zue turned into a bolt of lightning and flew out, darting in a straight line on the grass. "Chase!" Zhuge Han shouted coldly. "Northeast direction? Don't tell me that I don't know that it's a complicated place? 4 fifth-grade supreme martial artists are waiting for the two of you. Let's see where you can escape to." Everyone let out a howl. They chased after the two of them. Only the few supreme martial artists of the Lan clan stopped and looked at the bodies of the two dukes that had already turned into thousands of pieces. They wanted to cry but had no tears. Thud! Only then did Lan Meng's head fall from the sky. There were hundreds of sword marks on it. Chu Yang and Yi Zue ran all the way. At this moment, both of them were seriously injured. Before Chu Yang made his move, he already had 2 incomplete versions of heavy pills in his mouth. After he made his move, in less than a breath's time, The 2 heavy pills had already been used up. 2 heavy pills meant that he had blocked 2 fatal injuries and recovered 2 times. Including the first time, it meant that he had used up 3 incomplete versions of heavy pills in the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, going back and forth at the gates of hell 3 times. Such a frequency simply made Chu Yang himself break out in cold sweat and feel like his soul was about to leave his body. As they ran all the way, Chu Yang suddenly realized that Yi Zue's aura was slowly changing. He had been injured repeatedly and was even hit twice by a 4th-grade supreme martial artist. 3 of his ribs were broken. It should have been a normal reaction for him to get weaker and weaker. But now he was not getting weaker and weaker. Instead, he was getting crazier and crazier. It was as if these repeated injuries were instead triggered by some violent reason. The destructive, violent, and brutal aura on him was getting heavier and heavier. Every time this aura got heavier, his speed would become a little faster, and his aura would also become a little more majestic. Moreover, even in such a frenzied state, there were actually faint traces of black aura slowly emerging from Yi Zue's body and sword. As more and more black aura emerged, Chu Yang discovered to his surprise that the wound on Yi Zue's chest was also slowly healing. The bones in his body were also making subtle cracking sounds as they gradually returned to their original positions and then recovered. What's going on? Even though the 2 of them were working together, Chu Yang couldn't help but be shocked. This is demonic aura, the sword spirit said slowly in the consciousness space. No wonder Yi Zue's cultivation is so fast, and his body can produce demonic aura. But he's just an ordinary person. How can he produce such demonic aura? Demonic aura? The aura of an extraterrestrial demon? Chu Yang's heart shook as he asked. This shock was no small matter. He almost stopped in his tracks. I've never seen an extraterrestrial demon before either. The sword spirit was a little embarrassed. But according to the legends, this demonic aura is very similar to that of an extraterrestrial demon. This aura is very similar to. Chu Yang was puzzled at once. Why would there be an extraterrestrial demon aura on Yi Zue? Could it be that one could come into contact with extraterrestrial demons in this heavenly continent? If that was the case, this continent would have been extinct a long time ago. Could it still exist until now? The sword spirit pondered. He said, not necessarily. There are a few possibilities for this aura. The first possibility is that after a powerful extraterrestrial demon exploded, its legacy traveled through space and came to the heavenly continent. But it was obtained by Yi Zue. But if that's the case, Yi Zue shouldn't be as weak as he is now. Chu Yang asked, what's the second possibility? The second possibility is that something worn by an extraterrestrial demon, such as a jade pendant, a sword, and so on, was obtained by Yi Zue. But Yi Zue hasn't really unlocked its secret yet. But he's already on the verge of unlocking it now. The third possibility is that he was possessed by the soul of an extraterrestrial demon. However, if he was possessed, the heavenly continent would already be gone by now. So the third possibility is also impossible. The sword spirit said in one breath. Chu Yang seemed to have understood something. Then there's only the second possibility. The sword spirit nodded heavily. Yi Zue must have had a fortuitous encounter, and it must be related to the extraterrestrial demon. A sword light flashed across the grassland. Speed. It wasn't like a streak of light, but a streak of light. Behind him, several figures chased after him relentlessly like maggots on his bones. Dozens of miles passed in the blink of an eye. Yi Zue was also rather perplexed by Chu Yang beside him. This fellow, wasn't he on the verge of death? How did he suddenly become so lively? Could it be that he had been conserving his strength during the battle with me earlier? In that case, I can't be in a hurry to kill this person after this. It's best to have another battle. The sword light cut through a dense forest. With a thud, it plowed out a straight and smooth path. A tall mountain appeared in front of him. There was indeed something strange about this mountain. The entire mountain was like a pagoda. From the bottom to the top, one went up layer by layer. From the second layer onward, it was hidden in the clouds, barely visible. From the fourth layer onward, nothing could be seen at all. And this was when the sky was clear, and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. If it rained on a cloudy day, nothing could be seen from the foot of the mountain. The characteristics of the Pagoda Mountain were similar to the Zhuge clan's Mount Xingyun. In fact, it was even more solid than Mount Xingyun. Every corner of the continent had one or more such strange places. It seemed to be a coincidence, but it also seemed to be deliberately arranged. But in terms of the degree of mystery, the Pagoda Mountain was the most. There was a local folk song that talked about the Pagoda Mountain. Pagoda Mountain, the top of the pagoda is sharp. The top of the pagoda is a god. 1 foot on the ground and 1 hand holding up the sky. The sky is this heaven. In front of the Pagoda Mountain, there were only 4 paths to enter the Pagoda Mountain from this direction. Now these 4 paths were occupied by 4 people. Looking at the blazing sword light that was rushing toward them at high speed from afar, the 4 of them adjusted themselves automatically, giving up on the 2 paths at the side and guarding the 2 paths in the middle. As expected, Grand Duke, they have indeed rushed out. And they are really coming in this direction. A smile appeared on one of them. Perhaps Yi Zue doesn't know that if he really escapes in the direction of the Yi clan, there really won't be anyone stopping him there. Another person smiled and said, Grand Duke's great foresight has really reached a certain level. The third person said solemnly, they are getting closer and closer. We must take them down in one fell swoop. The other 3 laughed softly at the same time. We have long been prepared. Even if these 2 people are both tribulation sword masters, they won't be able to escape from the palms of the 4 of us today. They weren't boasting at all. 4 5th-grade supreme martial artists against a 4th-grade sword supremacy, who was already seriously injured, and a 2nd-grade sword supremacy, who was on the verge of death. It was absolutely a piece of cake for them. Chapter 13:13. Looking at the 2 rays of sword light that were getting closer and closer, the 4 supreme martial artists revealed a look of delight like a cat toying with a mouse. You guys were running for your lives. But you probably didn't expect that the escape route that you thought had the greatest chance of survival would be your doomsday, right? The sword light was getting closer and closer. The 4 supreme martial artists were ready to strike. Once they struck, it would be a thunderous strike. Chu Yang and Yi Zue had even discovered each other's aura. But at this moment, the 2 of them were helpless. As long as they entered the mountain, Yi Zue was confident that he could shake off the pursuers, based on his familiarity with the Pagoda Mountain. But the other party was waiting at the mountain pass. He couldn't enter at all. Yi Zue himself wasn't sure what the Pagoda Mountain was. He only knew that this mountain contained countless big secrets, and that his elder master often came to the Pagoda Mountain to cultivate in seclusion. Although he was at home after coming out of seclusion, he often ordered people to pay attention to the activities here. But he never said what was here. Yi Zue had come to the Pagoda Mountain before, and one of his most important things was obtained from the 4th level of the Pagoda Mountain. Above the 3rd level, there were thousands of mazes. Above the 4th level, there was no clue at all. That time, Yi Zue had almost died inside as well. But Yi Zue felt that even if he died that time, it was worth it, because he repeatedly came to the Pagoda Mountain more than 10 times after that. But he never found that wonderful place again. This matter was buried in the bottom of Yi Zue's heart, and became his greatest regret, as well as his greatest wish. When Chu Yang first saw the Pagoda Mountain, his expression was very strange. He dared to bet. He bet with all his assets, and even the tribulation sword. When he came from the north, he definitely didn't discover this mountain. He came from the north. But this mountain, it was in the northeast, less than 100 miles away. He actually didn't discover such a mysterious mountain range that was filled with fog and towered into the clouds. Even on the mountain where Wei Wuyan fought, he should have seen it clearly. That was what he should do. It was totally possible to see it from the northwest from afar. But he didn't discover it. Chu Yang remembered it very clearly. When he rushed over from the northwest, he even specially looked in the northeast direction. What he saw was a plain. But now, they were heading north from south. What they saw was actually the world-famous Pagoda Mountain. What was going on? There was an enemy blocking his path. Chu Yang and Yi Zue had no choice but to meet force with force. Breaking through the seal was the only way to survive. If he couldn't break through, he would have to do what Zhuge Han said. Go to the Zhuge family as a guest. A few hundred meters behind him, Zhuge Hun smiled proudly. Yi Chunshan often went into seclusion at the pagoda mountain. However, during this period of time, Yi Chunshan was not around. Everyone thought that it was impossible for them to set up an ambush here. But I set up an ambush here. Yi Zue, on the other hand, had finally lived up to his expectations and had chosen this path. Let's see where you can run to. At this moment, there was naturally no Yi Chunshan on the pagoda mountain. Furthermore, even if Yi Chunshan were to enter the pagoda mountain right now, he would also clearly say that there was not a single person on the pagoda mountain right now. Absolutely, not a single person existed. However, in reality, at this moment, on the first level of the pagoda mountain, there was a gray-robed man standing in the wind in the dense clouds. This gray-robed man's entire body seemed to have melted into the clouds, blowing with the breeze. As the clouds scattered and gathered again, it was as if he was the wind. He was the clouds. At this moment, this man was frowning as he looked at the sword light that was rushing toward him from the foot of the mountain. His gaze seemed to have transcended the distance and captured the two people who were running away in his eyes. He saw them clearly. Even the wounds on their bodies were clearly seen by him. Not a single one of them was missed. Tilting his head, the gray-robed man murmured somewhat doubtfully, "Why does this fellow look so much like Chu Yang?" Then he narrowed his eyes and focused on Chu Yang's body. Then he smiled and said, "It's really this little bastard." He clearly saw that under the cover of the bloody wounds all over Chu Yang's body, his muscles and bones were safe and sound. Furthermore, they were slowly but surely recovering on their own. This little rascal only knows how to pretend to be weak. Other than this move, he really doesn't know anything else. The gray-robed man seemed to be greatly dissatisfied with Chu Yang and had a lot of opinions. At this moment, looking at this little rascal in such a sorry state, the gray-robed man actually felt relaxed and happy. He couldn't help but open his mouth and laugh silently. "Little rascal, this is what you get for being naughty. You got your retribution, you deserve it. Haha." But the next moment he frowned. "From the looks of it, if I don't do anything, I'm afraid this rascal really won't be able to escape this time. This matter, if this little rascal dies, it won't be right." His gray-white eyebrows trembled slightly as he finally made up his mind. Forget it. Take it that I owe you." The gray-robed man sighed softly. "Otherwise, if this little rascal knows that I watched this rascal fall into danger without doing anything, I reckon this old man will really be fired." Sighing, he stretched out two hands from his sleeves and pressed down from afar. His face was full of reluctance. "Actually, I'm hoping that this rascal will be captured and sent to do manual labor every day." Sigh. Although he said this, for abundant and irresistible forces silently seeped out from his hands and pressed down with lightning-like speed. At this moment, the four supreme martial artists below were all smiling as they slowly raised their hands and placed them on the hilts of their swords and sabers. This action was completely natural for each of them. When the four of them moved together, it gave off an even more abundant and irresistible feeling. At this moment, the aura of the four of them suddenly rose to the peak. A pressure as heavy as a mountain surged out, surging toward Chu Yang and Yi Zue, who were coming straight at them like raging waves and stormy seas. Chu Yang only felt suffocated. For a moment, both of them were greatly shocked. Yi Zue cursed. "Bastards," they kept showing the aura of a fifth-grade supreme martial artist. But it turns out that each of these bastards is actually a fifth-grade supreme martial artist. Chu Yang's heart also sank fiercely. The reason why he agreed to follow Yi Zue here was because of Yi Zue's confidence. Yi Zue himself was a fourth-grade sword supremacy. If the other party was only a fifth-grade supreme martial artist, Yi Zue might have a chance of escaping into the mountains if he fought with his life on the line. Moreover, Chu Yang was assisting him from the side. But now, the other party was a fifth-grade supreme martial artist. The difference between a fourth-grade supreme martial artist and a fifth-grade supreme martial artist was almost equivalent to the difference between a fourth-grade supreme martial artist and a fifth-grade supreme martial artist. How was he going to fight this battle? Chu Yang cursed in his heart. "This bastard Yi Zue, you could have been muddle-headed at another time. But why did you have to be muddle-headed at such a critical moment and misjudge the other party?" Now look at you. I've really been screwed over by you. And it even flew toward the other party's hand on its own accord. Is there anything more tragic than this? And now that the other party had locked onto him, while he was running at full speed, it was already too late for him to change direction. A thought popped up in Chu Yang's heart, and he couldn't help but agree. As expected, don't be afraid of godlike enemies, but be afraid of pig-like teammates. This time, I've indeed been implicated by this pig. In front, the four people's hands pressed on the hilts of their swords and sabers at the same time. A heavy aura, together with a murderous aura, erupted with a loud bang. The person in the middle, his clothes fluttering, said with a smile, "Duke Yi, sorry for the offense." Yi Zue's eyes were already filled with irritation. He sped up and scolded, "Offend your mother. A good dog doesn't block the way. Get out of my way." The four supreme martial artists revealed a mocking smile at the same time. "Is great young Master Yi instructing us? I'm sorry, do you think that you still have the right to give us orders now?" Yi Zue let out a long howl and shouted, "Gather at one place and break through." Although Chu Yang despised him, was furious with him, and almost wanted to strangle him to death personally, he had to admit that this was the only best plan at the moment. Although it was also a sure-death plan, it was still a little stronger than the other plans. The tips of the two people's swords vibrated at the same time. The next moment, the aura of the sword supremacy erupted abruptly, exploding. Two beams of sword light merged into one, and actually emitted a blazing white airflow similar to sword intent. Then the two of them flew up, one on the left and one on the right. With their swords in front and their bodies behind, they charged toward the gap between the four people. The four supreme martial artists opposite them laughed heartily at the same time. They drew their swords out of their scabbards ready to fight. Right at this moment, the smiles on the four people's faces suddenly froze. Their swords and sabers were only pulled out halfway from their scabbards before they couldn't be pulled out anymore. At this moment, the four of them all felt a huge force suddenly descending from the sky, as if a piece of the blue sky had collapsed at this moment and just happened to smash onto their shoulders. Then this force condensed on their shoulders. Then they couldn't control their own bodies at all. They were completely stiff. Not only could they not draw their swords, they couldn't move, and they couldn't even change the smile on their faces. Just like that, they maintained an aggressive aura, and maintained a calm and graceful combat posture of experts. But they were all stiff right here, with a spirit of desperation, and an unparalleled aura of if they succeed or die trying. Chu Yang and Yi Zue suddenly burst forth and charged over. Both of them were paying close attention to the enemy's movements. Yi Zue was thinking, the moment they make a move, I'll immediately pull this fellow beside me and let him fall forward. Then I'll immediately turn around and leave. I'll save myself first before anything else. Chapter 13-14. Both of them were calculating in their hearts. Naturally, they also reserved some strength in their hands to prepare for any changes. The other party drew his sword abruptly, making both of their hearts skip a beat. Then, both of them rushed into that gap with sword light. But both of their muscles were tensed up, ready for the fatal blow that the enemy was bound to deliver. Both of them knew that this attack was bound to happen. It was absolutely necessary. As long as they could block this blow, they would be able to rush in. If they couldn't, they could only become captives. Luckily, I've prepared a scapegoat. Just that I don't know if I can succeed. Both of them thought this, secretly delighted and nervous. But the next moment, both of them felt a pleasant surprise that their hearts couldn't take. The other party actually maintained that majestic and murderous posture, and didn't move at all. They simply let the two of them pass through the four of them. They didn't even block them. In fact, after the two of them rushed in, those four people were still posing and acting cool. They didn't even turn back to chase after them. Even though they shouldn't turn back in a high-speed escape at a critical moment, the two Sword Supremes still couldn't help but turn back to look. It was really too strange. Why was this so? The moment they turned back, they only saw the backs of four people. These four people were still standing majestically, looking straight ahead. It's really strange. Yi Zue muttered. Are these four people just here to pose and scare us? Hurry up and go. Why do you have so much nonsense to say? Chu Yang lectured him exasperatedly, pulling Yi Zui along. It was only now that the two of them were truly in the same boat through thick and thin, working together as one. With a swoosh, they entered the pagoda mountain. In an instant, they disappeared without a trace in the clouds. Both of them understood that although they had their own ideas, if nothing happened to the other party, the possibility of escaping was infinitely close to zero. Luckily, something happened to the other party. It was all thanks to this accident. Not only were Chu Yang and Yi Zui stunned, even Zhuge Han, who was chasing after them, didn't know what to feel. He had been chasing after them for so long, using tricks, empty fort strategy, psychological warfare, and strong oppression. He finally drove these two people to the mouth of the cloth bag that he had set up. Just one cloth bag. These two people were the result of being captured without putting up a fight. There was absolutely no other possibility. Why was it that at such a time, the 4 fifth-grade supreme martial artists had all turned into statues? Zhuge Han originally had a confident smile on his face as he chased after Li Mu unhurriedly. His movements were natural and unrestrained. Looking from afar, he saw that the 4 experts of the clan had already begun to move in a posture that would frighten people to death. He almost laughed out loud. However, in the next moment, the 4 experts actually remained motionless, allowing the enemy to rush past them. He didn't even try to stop him. Seeing this, Zhuge Han couldn't catch his breath and fell to the ground with a thud. He rolled 7 or 8 times on the grass like an ingot before he stood up. He rubbed his eyes and looked over. That's right. The two of them had already disappeared behind the 4 fifth-grade supreme martial artists. Not even their shadows could be seen. And the 4 fifth-grade supreme martial artists were still smiling complacently, as if they had a card up their sleeves. They had a look of satisfaction on their faces, as if they had succeeded in their mission. He stood there in a pose. Zhuge Han only felt a buzzing sound in his head. He was dizzy and wanted to cry but had no tears. He roared, "What are you doing?" He let out a violent roar that shook the entire area. The echoes shook. In the clouds of the pagoda mountain, a series of echoes suddenly came. "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What? Is it? Is it?" It was really a thunderbolt in spring. However, the 4 supreme martial artists were still smiling happily, as if they were cats playing with a mouse. They stood majestically, with their hands on the sword hilt. Their swords were half a foot out of the sheath, cold light flashing and murderous. But they didn't move at all. 8 eyes looked at Zhuge Han mockingly. Even their eyebrows didn't move. At this moment, Zhuge Han's heart was cold. Damn it. What the hell is this? Didn't they get tricked? Am I the one who got tricked instead? Are these 4 fellows the spies of the Yi clan? Cough, that's impossible. One of them is my great-grandfather. How could it be? Zhuge Han led his men. He walked in front of the 4 supreme martial artists like lightning and shouted anxiously, "What the hell is going on? Why didn't you stop them?" His voice was full of questioning. The 4 supreme martial artists were still smiling mockingly, standing tall. Then, the 4 of them suddenly fell to the ground with a piu-piu-piu-piu sound. One by one, they fell on their backs, looking extremely pathetic. Then they got up, as if waking up from a dream. What's going on? What happened just now? Zhuge Han's lungs were about to explode. He roared, "What's going on? I'm the one asking you. What happened just now? Why didn't you stop them?" The 4 supreme martial artists looked at each other, and clearly remembered what happened just now. They just couldn't move, but it didn't mean they couldn't see or hear. He had seen and heard everything that had happened earlier. But they were puzzled. Why? Why couldn't they move all of a sudden? Facing Zhuge Han's furious face, the 4 supreme martial artists were a little ashamed and a little frightened. Wasn't it too easy to kill them with that kind of power just now? Just now. I don't know what happened just now. The 4 of us were just about to attack. And suddenly, we couldn't move. Then, you came. And we could move again suddenly. One of the 5th-grade supreme martial artists stammered. Even though he had said those words, he didn't believe them himself. So this explanation was really not backed up at all. You couldn't move all of a sudden just now. So they went over. But when I came, you could move again. So you moved? Zhuge Han was so angry that he almost fainted. His nose was crooked, and he roared. What nonsense is this? Do you believe it yourselves? The four supreme martial artists looked ashamed. Yes, they didn't believe it themselves. What should they say? But what happened just now was really like that. What can they say? You're angry, we understand, but we're also wronged. Zhuge Hun's handsome face was red. Do you know what you've done just now? Huh? Do you know how much disaster Yi Zue's escape will bring to our Zhuge clan? Do you know that you've let that person go just now? How big of a loss it is to our clan. That's the guidance of the heavenly secret that our three ancestors exchanged with their lives. Zhuge Hun roared, almost disregarding his image, stomping his feet and scolding. The four supreme martial artists hung their heads, looking depressed. Until now their minds were still a mess. What exactly happened? Could it be that they saw a ghost? But what kind of ghost dared to bewitch the minds of four fifth-grade supreme martial artists? Otherwise, how could they explain it? After a long time, everyone calmed down, and the four supreme martial artists had a chance to explain. It's really like this, I just felt my shoulders sink, and then I couldn't move. The fifth-grade supreme martial artist looked anxious. I'm not lying. I won't tell such a ridiculous lie. It's true. Ask them if you don't believe me. It's really true. It's really like this. The other three supreme martial artists nodded vigorously. It's absolutely true. I'm definitely not lying. Zhuge Hun fainted. We're all of the pure blood of the Zhuge clan. How can we betray our own clan? This sentence was very powerful. Zhuge Hun had to believe it. Besides, these four people were really not people he could punish. Could such a thing really happen? Zhuge Hun had to calm down and think about this problem. What kind of power is that? Zhuge Hun asked. What kind of expert? How can he have such power? A peak-grade supreme martial artist? The four fifth-grade supreme martial artists showed uncertain fear at the same time. I don't know, but what's certain is that Elder Master can't have such power. So on and so forth. Even a peak-grade supreme martial artist may not be able to. The people of the Zhuge clan discussed. Regarding this miraculous incident, everyone was talking about it. Zhuge Hun looked up at the sky and sighed. Yi Zue and that person had already entered the pagoda mountain, and there was no hope of catching them. Retreat immediately. Retreat to the clan. Zhuge Hun made a prompt decision. If they didn't leave now, they wouldn't be able to catch them, and they wouldn't be able to go back either. Yi Zue would definitely not let this go. The people of the Zhuge clan retreated like a tide, until they disappeared into the horizon. Zhuge Hun was still looking back frequently. They had failed this time. When would they have another chance? Was the Zhuge clan going to lose three ancestors again to predict the future again? Or, they were so sure this time, but they still failed so bizarrely. Then next time, were they confident? Was the Zhuge clan really coming to an end? The people of the Zhuge clan left with a heavy heart. The people of the Long clan, they left with an even heavier heart. The second duke was dead. He died in front of them, tragic beyond words. They followed Zhuge Hun to the territory of the Yi clan, and didn't get anything. The only gain was that they left 3 lives, including the second duke of the clan. Grand Duke Lan Rua was isolated in the lower 3 heavens and couldn't come up. Third Duke Lan Chang'e, second Grandmaster Lan Muxiue, and 70 to 80 supreme martial artists died in Tianji City. More than 20 supreme martial artists of the Lan clan died in a snowy wilderness in pursuit of the Moon Breeze couple. Second Duke Lan Meng died in the territory of the Yi clan. The talents of the Lan clan had really withered to the point where people would cry at the thought of it. Everyone's footsteps felt as if they were dragging 1,000 pounds. One could imagine what they would encounter when they returned this time. Every step they took was really filled with tears. Chu Yang and Yi Zue rushed into the pagoda mountain at lightning speed. Chapter 13:15. Why didn't they stop us? Both of them were puzzled by this question. Both of them said this almost at the same time. Then, both of them looked at each other questioningly. Then, they smiled bitterly at the same time. So you don't know either. Both of them said this at the same time again. Then, both of them burst into laughter at the same time. Just a moment ago, both of them were still scheming against each other. But now, after experiencing a life-or-death chase, and working together to successfully escape. Both of them had a feeling in their hearts, as if the enmity in their hearts had weakened a little. Humans were all like this. After suddenly experiencing extreme danger, they would always subconsciously feel incomparably close to the people around them, even if they were their enemies. But the kindness in this moment was the most precious thing in the world. Although I don't know, there's absolutely no reason for them to let us go. Chuyang smiled and analyzed. Their sudden abnormal behavior must have encountered some irresistible force. Brother Yi, could it be that your elder master is here? Could it be that he made a move and stopped the 4 fifth-grade supreme martial artists? Yizue pondered for a moment and said, impossible. If he can really subdue 4 fifth-grade supreme martial artists who are accumulating power and waiting for the right moment, and are about to attack, I'm afraid that my old ancestors' cultivation isn't at such a level yet. Chuyang let out an "oh." He became more and more puzzled. There were only a handful of people with such cultivation in the world. Who exactly was here? He recalled what Zi Xieching said before she left. An expert who fought with me in the heavenly layer. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. Could there be a hidden expert here? But why would this expert help us? Let's not think about these things. If someone really saved us, he must have a motive. Since he has a motive, we'll just have to wait. Yizue chuckled, stretched out his legs and sat down comfortably. Chuyang was rather impressed. This guy, other than being completely unlike a human when he's vicious, he's quite open-minded in terms of his temperament. We got to know each other after a fight. But I still don't know what your name is. A hint of a smile appeared on Yizue's cold face. He lowered his head and continued to treat his wounds, his movements extremely nimble. Me. If I tell you my name, you'll be shocked. Chuyang laughed mischievously. You scared me? Yizue revealed a smile that he couldn't help but laugh. Even if you say that you are the Dharma Supreme, I won't be surprised. My name is Chuyang. They all call me Extraterrestrial Demon. Chuyang chuckled. Isn't this name particularly scary? Yizue burst into laughter. If you are an extraterrestrial demon, then I would be the supreme ruler of the Heaven Imperial Court. What kind of joke is this? Chuyang chuckled and said, it seems that there are still a lot of sensible people in this world. Yizue snorted. He said, actually the world is like this. Who asked you to offend the ruler? When the Dharma Supreme said that you were an extraterrestrial demon, only a few ignorant idiots would believe it. You can ask the big clans and law enforcers. Who would believe that? But it doesn't matter if you don't believe me. I'll still shout this slogan to catch you. It's like a country where you offend the emperor. The emperor casually said that you are a rebel thief, and the whole world is besieging you. What can you do? We don't believe that you are an extraterrestrial demon, but if the Dharma Supreme says so, then you must be. You can't not be. Our big clans also don't want to offend the Dharma Supreme, so we can only follow suit to catch you. That's all. Today, you and I have gone through thick and thin together, so I won't deal with you. But tomorrow, when I return to the clan and see you again, I will still use the extraterrestrial demon as an extraterrestrial demon. And then, when I see you again, I will still use the crime of being an extraterrestrial demon to catch you, and then obtain preferential treatment from the Dharma Supreme for the Yi clan. Do you understand? Yizue said, full of sarcasm. What kind of preferential treatment can the Dharma Supreme give you? Chuyang asked, perplexed. Yizue laughed sinisterly. Brother, you are still too young. In this world, martial strength is not the only thing that makes one invincible. Power is the only thing that can truly make one invincible. In the 10,000 years of development of the Yi clan, side branches have been appearing continuously. Slowly, just those with the surname Yi alone have close to 1 million people. Among these 1 million people, only those who are suitable for cultivation. Not more than 100,000 people. And by 100,000 people I mean, martial arts grandmasters and martial artists are also considered cultivators. In that case, including their relatives, the population of the Yi clan is probably as high as 4 to 5 million people. What do these people eat? What do they drink? What do they use? Although our Yi clan has a big business, we can't just abandon these. Therefore, We can only keep adding all kinds of businesses to maintain the entire clan. After adding businesses, we can't just produce and sell our own businesses. We have to go through some channels to exchange our businesses for things that we need. And these channels are in the hands of the law enforcement officers. The Yi clan is very powerful, the #1 ruling clan in the heavens. But the law enforcement officers are in charge of the entire heavens. In the territory of the Yi clan, we can settle everything. But if you displease the Dharma Supreme, he can detain your goods and people at will in any territory that doesn't belong to the Yi clan. By the time you find someone, and use your connections to rescue these things, just the delay of time is enough to make this trip not only a waste of time, but also a complete loss. But you can't just not do it. As the Yi clan, how can we just abandon our own clansmen? We can't afford to lose face like this. If we lose, we can't even find the law enforcement officers. We can only blame ourselves for being unlucky. We also want to make some extra money from the affiliated clans, blood payers and bandits. But where in the world are there so many bandits waiting for you to exterminate? Not to mention the affiliated clans. If you mess with the affiliated clans, you're messing with yourself. But as long as the Dharma Supreme opens his mouth, all the people in our clan who are not suitable for cultivation will be able to eat their fill for at least a few years. Yizue laughed bitterly. It's the same for all the big clans. Gold and silver are worthless in the heavens now, but no matter how worthless they are, they still need to be earned. Those things won't fall from the sky. Every clan is extremely conflicted. Yizue laughed somewhat mockingly. How bloated is the legacy of 10,000 years? It was a good thing that a calamity sword master would appear every 10,000 years. If the inheritance continued, there might be internal strife, and the people on the same side would kill each other. Dying in the hands of others was better than dying in one's own hands. At least we won't feel aggrieved. This is the power of the law enforcement officers. This power is enough to make the big clans go crazy. Therefore, when the Dharma Supreme said to deal with you, none of the big clans objected. Of course, except for the current Li clan. The Li clan knows their own limits. Even if they listen to the Dharma Supreme, the Dharma Supreme doesn't like them now, so they might as well stake it all on one throw. If they become the next tribulation clan, it will prove the failure of the Dharma Supreme and us. On the other hand, if they can't, it's just death either way. It doesn't matter how they die. Chu Yang's expression was dark. You're very thorough. What's the use of being thorough? Yizue laughed mockingly. Actually, the biggest drawback of this world is that there are too many people. So I'll seize the opportunity to kill. One less is one less. Chu Yang rubbed his nose, smiled bitterly and didn't say anything. He was sure that this young Master Yi couldn't take praise. If you didn't praise him, he might still be able to say a few words of insight. But if you praised him, then it would immediately draw out the devil in him. How are you useful to the Zhuge clan? Yizue thought of something else. Didn't I still get dragged down by you? At the mention of this, Chu Yang felt like he was going to vomit. He said angrily, if you didn't get me out and force me to fight with you, what do you think I would have to do now? Yizue rolled his eyes. Not necessarily, but he didn't pursue this question anymore. Instead, he changed the topic. However, if you are really Chu Yang, then your advancement is really fast. Yizue's eyes were as cunning and vicious as a poisonous snake's. You're too young. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. To be honest, I'm also a little confused about my cultivation. It's just that I was being hunted down that time, and fell off a cliff. Coincidentally, there was a single horned snake at the bottom of the cliff with its head raised. I smashed into its horn and killed it. Then I fell unconscious, but something came out of the horn and automatically flowed into my mouth. After that, I was unconscious for a few months, and woke up feeling different. Then, I advanced a level every few days, until now. You can say that I was lucky. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. This lie was deliberately made up by the sword spirit in the tribulation space, to trick Yizue into saying something. There must be a reason for the heavenly demon aura on Yizue. This was also what Chu Yang was most worried about. As the saying went, to take in advance, one must give in advance. If you want someone to be honest with you, then you have to be honest with them first. But Yizue fell into deep thought. But what did you smash to death? Could it be? Hiss. He suddenly sucked in air as if he had a toothache. I don't know what that is either. As Chu Yang spoke, he described the thing he smashed to death, bit by bit according to the sword spirit's description. You're actually the one who smashed to death the last divine dragon of the heavens. Yi Zui's eyes were like copper bells. He looked at Chu Yang, full of envy, jealousy, and hatred. Ha! Chu Yang was a little dizzy. Legend has it that the divine dragon's entire body degenerates at the last stage. It's only waiting to bathe in the essence of heaven and earth, and then rush up to the heavens. And that period of time is when the divine dragon is at its weakest, so it usually hides very well. Who would have thought that when someone knocked you off the cliff, you would coincidentally smash into the divine dragon's single-horned dragon essence? And the most fortunate thing is that the dragon essence actually flowed into your mouth on its own. Such dumb luck is really TSK. This dragon essence is a supreme treasure in the world that can improve the meridians, spirit, and soul of a human. Yi Zui smacked his lips, his face filled with unimaginable envy. Suddenly, he grabbed Chu Yang's arm and bit down hard. Chapter 13:16. Yi Zui smacked his lips and closed his eyes to feel it. He said, "There is indeed the scent of the legendary divine dragon. But you've already digested all of it. It's useless now. What a pity." He smacked his lips again. From the looks of it, if there was still the power of the divine dragon in Chu Yang's body, he wouldn't mind eating Chu Yang alive at all. Chu Yang's hair stood on end. This guy really dares to eat people. He hurriedly took out some medicine and applied it on the bitten area. He cursed the sword spirit endlessly in his heart. The sword spirit looked innocent. How can he believe it if he doesn't take a bite and taste it? Chu Yang said angrily, "But where does the scent of the divine dragon come from on me?" The sword spirit was speechless. "You have Aoshian's gift on you." Chu Yang was tongue-tied. Yi Zui was already so jealous that his eyes were red. Why didn't such a good thing happen to me? Isn't it easy to be hunted down? I just casually went around the territories of the various clans and killed a few important people. Wouldn't I be hunted down endlessly? Sigh. Chu Yang let out a wry laugh. This is just luck. This is simply heaven-defying luck, Yi Zui said furiously. From the looks of it, he was still brooding over the fact that such luck didn't happen to him. Actually, I should really thank the luck this time for changing me. If not for this incident, I would just be a good-for-nothing. Chu Yang continued to act according to the sword spirit's script, his voice full of emotion. You don't know that before this, I was stuck at Martial Grandmaster and couldn't advance no matter what. Everyone said that in my lifetime, I would stop at Martial Grandmaster. Sure enough, when Yi Zui heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up. He sized Chu Yang up carefully before a smile appeared on his face. He laughed strangely. So you were once a good-for-nothing too? Yes. Could it be that you were too? Chu Yang followed up. Yi Zui's face darkened. His eyes shone with a vicious light. He said slowly, "That was a humiliation that I can never forget in my entire life." Chu Yang let out a long sigh. Everyone has a bitter past. Sigh. This sigh made Yi Zui empathize with each other even more. Right at this moment, the gray-robed man on the mountain peak also let out a long sigh. There was an interested look in his eyes, as if he was interested in Yi Zui. He was also very interested. Then, he raised his hand, and a faint wisp of spiritual consciousness floated down. However, I can't tell you about my bitter past. It's just that I can't bear to think about it. Originally, I was also a good-for-nothing. Haha. As for how I became stronger, I can't tell you even if I die. Yi Zui was very tight-lipped. Chu Yang was somewhat disappointed. He thought to himself, it seems that I still can't get anything out of him. In the tribulation space, the sword spirit sighed in disappointment. Suddenly, Yi Zui heaved another long sigh. Suddenly he changed his tone and said, "But it's okay to talk about it. You and I are strangers. There's no harm in telling you." Chu Yang was stunned. Why did he change his mind? Just a moment ago she said, "I'd rather die than tell you." The next moment it actually became, "It's okay to tell you." Fuck, is this Grand Duke crazy? Such self-contradictory words. He actually dared to say it out loud. Yi Zui gritted his teeth and said, Back then, when I was born, I was known as a genius with unblocked meridians. When I was young, I was already interested in swords. I advanced at an astonishing speed and became a sword king when I was 15 years old. I was the only one in the entire heavens. The clan made me a Grand Duke and hoped that I would bring glory to the Yi clan. I was also very proud of my achievements. But after 15 years old, no matter how I cultivated, I realized that I couldn't improve at all. I once didn't eat or drink for half a month and just practiced swordsmanship. When I was tired, I would cut myself a few times, but it was completely ineffective. When I was 18 years old, the clan finally couldn't take it anymore. They invited a high priest from the Medicine Valley to take a look at me. Only then did they know that a certain section of my meridians was naturally narrow. Although it was just a small section, it couldn't be improved for the rest of my life. In other words, when I became a first-grade sword king, it was the highest level in my life, and there was no cure for it. When the clan found out about this, they immediately abolished my position as Grand Duke. During that period of time, although I was still desperately cultivating every day, no one paid attention to me anymore. Yizue gritted his teeth and smiled viciously. When I was 24 years old, during winter, everyone in the clan was having a meal together, but no one informed me. I snuck out of the clan and came here. He pointed at his feet. I went up the pagoda mountain alone on New Year's Eve and wandered around aimlessly. I even thought of dying. Then, I don't know what happened. I walked to a fork in the road and kept walking. Suddenly, I barged into a patch of clouds. In the midst of the clouds, I discovered a cave entrance. It was very cold then, so I went in. And undeniably, that cave entrance also seemed to be beckoning me to go in. After I went in, I discovered a strange corpse. Yizue tilted his head, a ferocious look on his face. He said, "It was a very, very strange corpse. In any case, it wasn't human. It looked like a monkey. Yes, it was killed by a sword. That sword was pierced into the corpse's chest." I found it strange. Why was there a corpse in this cave, and a sword on the corpse? Since that person had killed this monster, why didn't he take the sword away? Right at this moment, that sword suddenly vibrated. I clearly heard someone talking to me, saying, "If you pull out this sword, you will own the world." At that time I thought, I'm already fucking crippled. What world can I own? So I didn't pull it out. Yizue heaved a long sigh. Now I really regret it. If I had pulled out that sword back then, my achievements might have been far greater than what I have now. This result was really beyond Chu Yang's expectations. He didn't pull out the sword. From what Yizue said, Chu Yang and the sword spirit unanimously agreed that that sword was most likely the weapon of the extraterrestrial demon and had demonic properties. Yizue probably achieved what he had today because of this sword, but they never expected that he didn't pull out the sword. Yizue sighed for a long while before he said, "At that time, I was also extremely scared. I kept feeling that this matter was a little strange. Then, I realized that there was still half a scabbard on the ground. I thought, why don't I take this scabbard first? So I grabbed the scabbard in my hand. But the moment I grabbed it, I suddenly felt dizzy. The scabbard seemed to have a spirit and power. It pulled me towards the sword. I wanted to throw it away, but I couldn't. I struggled with all my might. I didn't expect that my head would hit the wall of the cave, and I would faint. But I didn't notice that the scabbard actually stood up from the ground, and I sat on it. When Yizue said this, Chu Yang couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. Think about it. What if half a scabbard was stuck in the ground, sitting on it? If I sat on it? Minister Chu suddenly felt a chill run down his ass, and couldn't help but tighten it. When I woke up, I was covered in blood and the scabbard was already gone. Yizue continued. Chu Yang felt even more like he was about to burst out. Nonsense, of course it's gone. It even did that. I still had a feeling that there was still a force pulling me toward that sword. I was really scared and scrambled out of the cave. I didn't even know how I went down the mountain and returned home. The family was still having a feast and drinking celebration. No one noticed that I was covered in blood and stains, and no one knew that I went out and came back. Yizue let out a wry laugh. Or perhaps they knew and just didn't care. It was only several days after I returned home that I realized that the scabbard hadn't disappeared. Instead, it had fused into my body through my blood. Chu Yang rolled his eyes and thought to himself, I'm afraid it definitely didn't enter through your blood, right? Instead, it was you who swallowed that sword directly under some kind of lucky coincidence. Otherwise, how could it have let you go so obediently? As he listened to Yi Zue's story, Chu Yang was suddenly filled with admiration for this world. Just how much of a coincidence did it have to be to create such a world-shaking figure like Yi Zue? Such an encounter was definitely something that no matter how hard one racked their brains, they definitely wouldn't be able to come up with. And on that scabbard, there was the first half of a mental cultivation technique, and the first half of a sword technique. As for the other half, it was on the sword that I didn't manage to grab. Yet that latter half was the most important. At this point, Yi Zue was incredibly depressed. And there was a huge secret on that sword. That was even more of a pity. Sigh, having half a scabbard in my body, this feeling is really... Yi Zue sighed. At first, I also felt very uneasy, but then I realized that my meridians had suddenly returned to normal. I suddenly started to improve again, and that narrow section of meridians had already returned to normal. So I wondered if it was because of this half a scabbard. So I thought of trying to cultivate the upper half of the mental cultivation technique. I didn't expect that after trying it out, my cultivation would improve by leaps and bounds. My cultivation speed actually reached more than 10 times the usual speed. Yi Zue said heavily. This half of the mental cultivation technique is called the Heavenly Demon Great Law. The moment the words Heavenly Demon Great Law left his mouth, the expression of the sword spirit in the tribulation dimension changed. Chu Yang could even sense the sword spirit's fear. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart as well. Could this Heavenly Demon Great Law really be so terrifying? Of course I was happy that the Heavenly Demon Great Law was effective. So I started to cooperate with the Heavenly Demon Great Law again to practice that half of the sword technique, the demonic spirit slaying sword. Only then did I know that this was definitely the #1 technique in the entire heavens. The #1 sword technique. Its power was so great that it was unimaginable. Only then did I know that I had missed out on such a huge opportunity. But the Heavenly Demon Great Law was incomplete, and the demonic spirit slaying sword also only had the first half of the moves. However, the entire sword technique should have 18 moves. Moreover, only by using the complete Heavenly Demon Great Law to activate the complete demonic spirit slaying sword can one reach the supreme realm of slaughtering all living beings. Legend has it that when this technique is cultivated to a high level, one can slaughter all living beings in the world with just one strike. How I want to slaughter all living beings in this bastard's world. Chapter 13:17. After that, I came here countless times to search for it. But because I was in a daze at that time, I simply wandered around aimlessly and couldn't remember the exact location. Until now, several decades have passed, and I actually still haven't found that strange cave entrance. When Yi Zue said this, the gray-robed man on the mountaintop sighed and murmured, I see. I was wondering why this fellow came once every 2 to 3 days. I see. After this fortuitous encounter, I kept it a secret and cultivated hard. Within 3 months, I became a sword emperor. During the clan competition, I appeared out of nowhere and killed the Grand Duke who had replaced me. At the same time, I defeated and killed my brothers of the same generation one by one. The 2 of them were from the same mother as me. I took back the position of Grand Duke. Yi Zue continued, his eyes gleaming with pleasure. Chu Yang sighed somewhat. Even though they were in the wrong in the past, they were your brothers after all. You killed them just like that? And you didn't feel guilty at all? It was only then that I realized that my temperament had actually changed along with the cultivation technique. I became cold and heartless. I became someone who viewed human lives as worthless. Every time I killed someone, I would always feel my blood boiling and incredibly excited. My cultivation improved faster and faster, but my temperament became colder and colder. When Yi Zue said this, he seemed to have touched the softness in his heart in the past. He actually sighed softly. Actually back then, I was also a kind and honest person. Moreover, I had always been filled with leeway toward this life. I once thought of using my strength to make the clan rule the world, to protect my parents and brothers and sisters. It was as if I used my strength to help many people and let everyone spread my good name. I also once thought that after I succeeded in practicing the sword, I would start a family. I would have a beautiful wife and concubines and live in harmony. But ever since I practiced the demonic great technique and the demonic spirit slaying sword, I became colder and colder. No matter how beautiful a woman was in my eyes, she was merely a body waiting to be killed by me. Other than practicing the sword, I didn't feel anything else. Other than the thrill of killing, I have no interest in anything else. I have never taken a wife until now. The women in this world only disgust me, but they don't make me like them. Furthermore, when I was being chased, I suffered many injuries and was in extreme pain. Countless strands of demonic energy actually appeared spontaneously, transforming my body and healing my injuries. However, as the demonic energy flowed out bit by bit, I can feel myself becoming more and more brutal, Yi Zue said rather painfully. Back then, I also used to sing in the daytime. Drunk on a good night, handsome and young. A gentle scholar. The three sighed at the same time. One speaker, two listeners. One was in front of him, while the other was hidden in the dark. The two listeners had the same thought at the same time. This extraterrestrial demon is indeed terrifying. At the same time, a second thought came to his mind. So there is such a sword in this mountain. A demonic sword. Right at this moment, Yizue suddenly shuddered all over and jumped to his feet. He looked at Chu Yang as if he had seen a ghost. You bastard. What did you do to me? Chu Yang felt a little dizzy. He asked in confusion. What did I do to you? Suddenly he became furious. What can I do to you? Yizue was flustered and exasperated. You bastard. You must have cast a demonic spell on me. He couldn't help but be flustered and exasperated. This was because he suddenly realized that he had actually revealed the biggest secret in his heart in great detail, without even being aware of it. This was the absolute secret that he relied on to survive. Before this, apart from himself, no one else in the entire heavens knew about it. Chuyang, you are indeed an extraterrestrial demon. I didn't expect you to have such a technique to bewitch people. Yi Zue's face was full of murderous intent. Chuyang was confused and disoriented. Do you know what you are saying? Yi Zue sneered. Of course I know, but I know even more that you are an extraterrestrial demon. Today, I must get rid of this evil for the heavens. Chuyang was confused right away. He was really confused. What the hell? What exactly is going on? I really didn't force you to say anything. Chuyang, how dare you use such a despicable method on me? Hand over your life. Yizue shouted and drew his sword. All of a sudden demonic energy surged. Chuyang jumped up in a flurry, completely unaware of what was going on. Drawing his sword to block, he shouted angrily, What exactly is wrong with you? Yizue didn't answer, but his sword moves became fiercer and fiercer. His expression was ferocious, as if he couldn't wait to chop Chuyang into pieces. Chuyang retreated step by step, instinctively using the gentle water sword intent to ward off the other party's attacks. But now, for some reason, Yizue's cultivation had suddenly increased by a lot. In the battle just now, Chuyang could still ward off his attacks, but now he was actually powerless. Yizue's gaze became more and more ruthless. Chuyang, you and I are irreconcilable. Chuyang was really so wronged. Encountering such a lunatic was really something that would make anyone feel helpless. A moment ago, they were sitting together and having a heart-to-heart talk, talking about everything. The next moment, he drew his sword and killed without mercy. I really have to take my hat off to him. Take the first move of my demonic spirit-slaying sword. Heavenly Demon descends. Yizue jumped up abruptly and fell straight down from the sky. A faint stream of demonic energy could already be clearly seen mixed in the sword light, slashing toward him at lightning speed. Wherever the sword momentum reached, Chuyang's front, back, left, and right were actually sealed by the demonic energy at the same time. Chuyang took a deep breath. Iron wall and copper wall were activated brazenly, and then firmament winds and clouds horizontally. There was a loud clang. Yi Zue's body swayed, and Chu Yang retreated 7 to 8 steps. Blood actually seeped out of the corners of his mouth. This bastard actually disregarded his injuries, and was already able to exert the power of a third-grade sword supremacy. And he was still continuing to increase it. In that collision just now, if not for the fact that the tribulation sword technique was incomparably miraculous, and far more exquisite than this demonic spirit-slaying sword, Chu Yang would almost have been rendered immobile by that sword move just now. Demonic spirit-slaying sword, second move. Heavenly demon spreads its wings. Demonic spirit-slaying sword, third move. Demonic slaughter blade. Fourth move, demonic blood. Fifth move. Chu Yang let out a strange cry and spat out blood. He turned and fled. As he retreated step by step, he had already reached a fork in the road. Chu Yang ran out in a panic. Motherfucker! This bastard has actually already advanced to the peak of third-grade sword supremacy. How am I supposed to withstand this? Where do you think you're going? Yi Zue's eyes were bloodshot. If I don't kill you today, I swear I'm not human. He gave chase closely. In front, Chu Yang fled extremely gloomily, his heart filled with endless sorrow. What exactly is going on? Of course, Minister Chu didn't know that Yi Zue had revealed his greatest secret, because his divine sense had been controlled by someone just now. In a situation where Chu Yang didn't know anything, he had been passively taken advantage of. Now that the person controlling him had withdrawn his divine sense, how could Yi Zue not feel angry, worried, embarrassed and apprehensive when he saw that he had actually revealed his greatest secret to Chu Yang? Right now, he was already at the point where he wouldn't rest until he killed Chu Yang. On the mountaintop, the gray-robed man laughed so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. I'll let you take advantage of me. Today, I'll let you know that some advantages can't be taken so easily. The two of them, one chasing and the other fleeing, had already turned several rounds in an instant. The terrain here was unbelievably complicated, but Chu Yang fled in front while Yi Zue chased from behind. He actually didn't relax at all. Chu Yang understood at once. This guy comes here often, and already knows the terrain of the few levels below like the back of his hand. If I continue to run down these few levels, I'm afraid he'll really catch up to me. The moment he thought of this, he stopped running down. When he reached the next fork in the road, he leaped and darted up the mountain path. Yi Zue gave chase furiously. Don't run. Hurry up and let me kill you. I'm going to swallow all your flesh and blood, and see if I can convert the dragon essence. Chu Yang felt his hair stand on end. He cursed madly for being a pervert and ran even faster. In an instant, after passing through several maze-like intersections, Chu Yang had already darted up to the 5th level and hidden in the clouds. Yi Zue was still chasing after him, but the distance between them had already widened slightly. Finally, when he reached the 5th level, Chu Yang felt his body sink abruptly. The pressure on him suddenly increased by several hundred times. He forced himself to make a random turn and continuously quickened his pace. After making 7 to 8 turns and leaving Yi Zue behind, he finally heaved a long sigh of relief and leaned against the stone wall to rest for a while. Yi Zue's yelling and cursing was almost right in front of him, but he was running nonstop, searching for Chu Yang's figure. But Chu Yang was hiding not far away. He actually couldn't find him no matter how hard he tried. There's indeed something strange about this mountain. Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief. He muttered inwardly, just keep running around here to look for me. It'll be best if you die of exhaustion. He hurriedly swallowed an incomplete version of the heavy pill and circulated his energy to heal his injuries. To his surprise, he discovered that wisps of black aura were being forced out from his hand. Demonic aura. Chu Yang couldn't help but be taken aback. When they were fighting in the forest, Yi Zue still couldn't force out the demonic aura, let alone use it to infect the human body. But now it had actually reached such a stage. Could it be that today's battle had actually given Yi Zue such a huge boost? Chu Yang felt more and more that this Yi Zue was definitely a disaster if he kept him alive. But now there was really nothing he could do. Right now he was still hiding from him, let alone killing him. How can I kill him? Chu Yang frowned deep in thought. Right now he had already changed his mind. It was already absolutely impossible for him to use Yi Zue to enter the Yi clan. Since that was the case, what was there to pity about killing him? You want to kill him? A soft voice actually rang out right next to Chu Yang's ear. Chu Yang could even feel the hot breath by his ear. A hand gently rested on his shoulder, and even patted him on the shoulder. For a moment, Chu Yang felt as if his soul had left his body. A chill went down his spine, and all the hair on his body stood on end. With a whoosh he shot out. What the heck, who is it? Chapter 13:18. Chu Yang's whole body went limp at once. Oh my god, it's you? He sat on the ground with a thud, his whole body sweating profusely. Just now, he was really scared out of his wits. His heart almost jumped out of his throat. This person was actually a familiar face. A familiar face that he hadn't seen in a long time. Ning Tianya. Chu Yang was completely relieved. He was safe. He was finally safe. Why are you here? Ning Tianya frowned and looked at Chu Yang from the corner of his eyes. What are you doing here? Chu Yang snorted and hurriedly started to treat his injuries. I haven't asked you yet. Why are you here? Facing Ning Tianya was definitely much easier than facing Baluching. In Chu Yang's opinion, Baluching wasn't easy to talk to, but Ning Tianya wasn't. Besides, according to Mo Qinggu, Ning Tianya was also the one who doted on his disciples the most. Of course I'm here for something. I have no choice but to come. Ning Tianya was very uncomfortable. Every time this little guy saw him, he wasn't very respectful. He was too casual. The last time in the northern wastelands, he was made a fool of by this guy. Of course I'm here for something too. I also have no choice but to come. Chu Yang rolled his eyes. After treating his injuries, Zhang Xian raised his head. Ning Tianya said angrily, Nonsense, if not for you, why would I be here? Chu Yang was surprised. Because of us? Ning Tianya sighed and said, It's because of you. Before the battle of slaying of the Tao that day, Ning Tianya was ambushed by the Dharma Supreme and Wu Jiuecheng, and was seriously injured. He couldn't recover in a short time, so he had to find a place to hide secretly. However, when he stole the fortune, Ning Tianya also got a share of that huge fortune. With the help of the fortune, Ning Tianya got through the initial crisis, and his injuries improved. The destructive power of the sword intent gradually disappeared from his body. Then the real recovery began. As the #1 expert in the world, Ning Tianya naturally knew where his injuries were the most beneficial. Therefore he traveled day and night to the Pagoda Mountain. Although Ning Tianya didn't know what was going on, he knew for sure that it had something to do with the Tribulation Sword Master. Since the Tribulation Sword Master had done this, then, in Ning Tianya's heart, the crisis over there was naturally resolved. Therefore, he could only focus on recuperating. Anyway, Baluching was taking care of his disciple. So, Ning Tianya was very relieved. A few months later, Ning Tianya, who had mostly recovered from his injuries, went out from the Pagoda Mountain. When he heard about Tu Dao, he was shocked on the spot. However, the real result and process of the battle against Tu Dao, however, no one knew about it. Ning Tianya made many inquiries, but he only knew that the second grandmasters of the 8 super clans and several hundred supreme martial artists had all died an unnatural death. As for the situation on Chu Yang's side, no one knew. After some time, it was said that Moon Breeze was still alive. However, there was no news of Baluching ever since. Ning Tianya was so anxious that his injuries almost relapsed. He had no choice but to calm his heart and focus on recovering. He had only recovered for a few days and was preparing to go out. As luck would have it, Chu Yang bumped into this place. It was only after hearing about Ning Tianya's encounter that Chu Yang found out that Ning Tianya had actually also participated in the battle outside Tianji City that day before the slaying of Dao battle. How are your injuries now? Chu Yang asked. Of course I'm fine now. Ning Tianya was rather smug. In terms of actual cultivation, Wu Jiuecheng is about the same as me. Besides, at our level, as long as he didn't personally plant the poison in my internal organs, it wouldn't affect me at all. It wouldn't harm me. Only that astral sword strike caused me to be greatly surprised. The next time I see Wu Jiuecheng, I'll definitely have to battle him again. Ning Tianya chuckled. I can't just let that bastard take advantage of me. Chu Yang's lips wriggled a few times, but he didn't say anything. Right, where's Bulu Qing? How is he? Where's Xiaowu? Ning Tinya asked excitedly. Outside. Yi Zue's roars and shouts came closer and further away again. Xiaowu is at my house now. She's very safe, Chu Yang said. Ning Tinya immediately felt that something was amiss. Where's old Bu? Chu Yang sighed. Elder Bu participated in the slaying of Dao battle. He was the main force there, fighting against Wu Jueqing, the Dharma Supreme, the second grandmasters of the 8 super clans, and more than 100 law enforcement officers and supreme martial artist experts of the 8 super clans. Ning Tinya's face turned ashen. With such a lineup, even if both he and Bulu Qing were to fall into it at the same time, there would be no chance of survival. In that case, could it be that Bulu Qing? What exactly happened? Ning Tinya growled. Supreme martial artist Bu. After that battle he ascended to heaven. Chu Yang sighed. Ah. Ning Tinya was dumbstruck. Could it be? Xiaowu's soul has actually dissipated? Otherwise, why can't I sense anything here? Chu Yang murmured. He just ascended to heaven. Bastard. Ning Tinya's eyes reddened. Who killed him? He grabbed Chu Yang's collar and shook him fiercely. Even though I'm prohibited from participating in the Sword Master Heaven battle, I'll definitely slaughter the entire family of the person who harmed Xiaowu. Not even a chicken or a dog will be spared. Chu Yang was shaken so hard that his bones and muscles felt like they were going to break. Who said? Bulu Qing was killed. Ning Tinya was stunned. You mean? Chu Yang rolled his eyes and said, I mean, he ascended to heaven. I didn't say that he was dead. Ning Tinya was dumbstruck again. What do you mean? Cough, he collapsed the sky and shattered the void. Chu Yang rubbed his shoulder. Ning Tinya was stunned for a while. Suddenly, his face turned red and he flew into a rage. He grabbed Chu Yang and said, Bastard! How dare you make fun of me? See if I don't arrange you into 3,000 different appearances. Chu Yang struggled and shouted. I didn't say that he was dead from the start. You said it yourself. Before he finished speaking, Ning Tinya smacked him heavily with his palm. Chu Yang screamed. He could clearly feel that his buttocks had split into 8 pieces. This was definitely not an adjective. It was really 8 pieces. Both buttocks were split into 4, and the muscles were completely staggered. Chu Yang's screams changed the pitch of his voice. You misunderstood. Who's to blame? It's a pity that I'm seriously injured. Ning Tinya ignored him and smacked him again. This time, the 8 pieces of buttocks were restored to 2 pieces. Then with another smack, another 8 pieces of buttocks were split into different shapes. Smack, 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 smack. Chu Yang was hovering between life and death. His heart was already full of regret. Wouldn't it have been fine if I had honestly said everything in one breath? Why did I have to think that I was suddenly safe, and even wanted to make a joke? Now I'm making a joke. Help, wait. Chu Yang shivered and finally remembered something. If you hit me again, I'll hit your disciple when I go back. Ning Tinya was stunned. He paused and suddenly flew into a rage. You actually dare to threaten me. My disciple's heart has already been stolen by you. She'll be your wife sooner or later. What does it have to do with me if you hit your own wife? Smack, 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 smack. It was getting heavier and heavier. Chu Yang was miserable beyond words. He struggled and shouted, Spare me. I won't. Before Senior Bu went to heaven, he left you a message. Chu Yang moaned. Ning Tinya stopped at once. What message? Right at this moment, Yi Zue's voice rang out. Chu Yang, hand over your life. Ning Tinya frowned. He grabbed the 2 pieces of meat on Chu Yang's buttocks and flew out with a whoosh. Chu Yang was extremely upset. He said discontentedly, Wouldn't it be better to just kill him? How peaceful would that be? Kill him personally? Ning Tinya snorted. Then don't you think that he's too prestigious? Chu Yang really fainted at this sentence. In the blink of an eye, he was already in the area surrounded by clouds and mist. Chu Yang only felt that he was rising all the way, and slowly, he felt that the air also became cold below. Yi Zue's shouts could no longer be heard. Yi Zue searched frantically for a while before he gave up resentfully. He found his own way out, and then sped all the way back to the clan. He must mobilize experts here. Firstly, to teach Zhuge Han and the other bastards a good lesson. Secondly, to guard the way out of the pagoda mountain. No matter which direction that little brat came out, he must not be allowed to return alive. Yi Zui gritted his teeth. Chu Yang knew his biggest secret. If he actually walked out of the pagoda mountain alive, then, could his secret still be a secret? It was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't announce it to the whole world. Chu Yang was just a fake extraterrestrial demon, but he seemed to be much more authentic than him. At least he had received the inheritance. Yi Zui's figure disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye, and at this moment, at the top of the pagoda mountain, Chu Yang was facing a serious interrogation. Quick, tell me, what did Baluqing say before he broke through the void? Ning Tianya was somewhat impatient. Chu Yang only felt that his buttocks were no longer 8 petals, but had already become 17 to 18. He moaned. Supreme Martial Artist Bu laughed loudly and said, "What did he say?" Ning Tianya asked. Supreme Martial Artist Bu said, "Ning Tianya, you old bastard. You've been fighting with me for 14,000 years. You've been beaten up by me every time. You've been hung up on a tree to dry. I've beaten you to death every time. You're an old bastard, an old bastard." Chu Yang groaned and said viciously. Then he said, "Please believe me. Baluqing indeed said that." Ning Tianya's face was already pulled so hard that even his nose was crooked to one side. "I believe you. I believe you. Like hell I believe you." What followed was another round of torture. Chu Yang could no longer scream, but a ball of black gas finally came out of his mouth. He hurriedly begged for mercy. Okay. The demonic energy is really gone. It's been forced out, no need. Chapter 13:19. Chu Yang, who was hovering between life and death, finally confessed. Earlier, Yi Zui's demonic aura had inadvertently invaded his body. As it was his first time coming into contact with it, Chu Yang immediately suffered a great loss. Although he managed to expel it in time, part of it still entered his internal organs. Under the sword spirit's efforts, on one hand, Chu Yang was really joking around to liven up the atmosphere. On the other hand, he used Ning Tianya's supreme divine might to draw into his body, and the sword spirit used it to successfully force the devil energy out of his body. At this point, he was completely relaxed. However, how could Ning Tianya's power be so easily borrowed? Although he clearly knew what Chu Yang was doing, and was also deliberately cooperating with Chu Yang to force out the devil energy, he was truly angry in his heart, and somewhat embarrassed. Fortunately, this old man has cultivated well, and has strong willpower. Otherwise, wouldn't I have cried because of your little trick? If that's the case, how will this old man have the face to see others? Therefore, Supremacy Ning's fury was undeniable. Now that he knew that this little girl was fine, if Ning Tianya didn't torture her fiercely, when would he? "Are you going to confess or not?" Supremacy Ning asked imposingly. "I'll confess. Your Excellency, please don't hit me anymore. I'll confess. I'll confess everything." Minister Chu's face was covered in tears and snot. "Quickly confess." "Yes, sir. Could you please stop first? My butt hurts a lot." Ning Tianya suddenly felt like laughing. He gave him another fierce slap, and only then did he stop amidst a certain someone's blood-curdling screams that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. "Hurry up." "Yes." At that time, Supreme Martial Artist Bu said, "When you see old Ning, tell him, I've fought for the title of #1 in the world for 14,000 years. Actually, I've long known that I'm not as good as him, but this time I've won. Haha. I'll wait for him up there to settle the score with me." Finally, Chu Yang confessed everything. He recited the words that the Moon Breeze couple had said without missing a single word. "This bastard." A smile appeared on Ning Tianya's face. "Actually, I already knew that he would say that." Chu Yang rolled his eyes. "You already know this. What else do you need me to say? Do you have nothing better to do?" But of course, he didn't dare to say it out loud. He just rubbed his buttocks in grief. The more he rubbed, the more painful it became. He couldn't possibly eat an incomplete version of the heavy pill, just because of this small injury on his buttocks, right? That would be too much of a wastrel. Ning Tianya sat at one side, a faint smile on his face. Heaven Palace. Heaven Palace. Haha. Little Boo has gone up this time. You're going to suffer. Ha ha ha. Why? Chuyang asked curiously. Above the heavenly imperial court. Our cultivation is too weak. Ning Tianya smiled. Many years ago, I once went up there once. I went up once. Chuyang opened his mouth wide. Yes, I've been there once. Ning Tianya sighed. That place is really good. The spiritual energy is abundant, and the environment is beautiful. Spirit herbs and spirit medicines are everywhere. But the number of experts there is also frighteningly high. After only 3 days, he was thrown down. He said that he wanted me to watch over the sky. Ning Tianya said with some nostalgia. I watched the Tribulation Sword Master succeed. The day the Sword Master succeeded. When I ascend to heaven. So that's how it is. Chuyang suddenly realized. From what he could sense, Ning Tianya's cultivation should be much stronger than the others. However, in reality, they were on the same level. Chuyang had long felt that something was off. So you suppressed your cultivation? Chuyang asked. Not bad. If I were to release all of my cultivation, I would be able to do so. I probably shattered the void and left in an instant. Ning Tianya smiled. Touching his chin, he said. If Xiaobu knew about this, he would probably be very depressed. I'm depressed just listening to it. Chuyang rolled his eyes. Since you're done talking about me, let's talk about you. I'm not done yet. How is Xiaowu? Ning Tianya persisted. Helplessly, Chuyang had no choice but to give a detailed account of everyone's situation. Only then did Ning Tianya relax. You came to this pagoda mountain by chance. You finally reached a certain level of fate. Ning Tianya's voice became serious. I knew that you would definitely come. But I didn't know that you would come so early. And the earlier you come, the greater your fortune. Fortune? Chuyang asked, puzzled. Yes, fortune. Ning Tianya nodded affirmatively. Have you noticed that as long as you come from the north, you won't be able to see this pagoda mountain? But if you come from any direction other than the north, you'll be able to see it. Yes, I've noticed this problem. What's the reason? Chuyang's biggest doubt was aroused at once. Ning Tianya smiled indifferently. The pagoda mountain, the pinnacle of yin and yang, overturning the earth with 5 layers. This is the pagoda mountain of the heavens continent. Chuyang memorized it silently. This is the wonder of the pagoda mountain. The pagoda mountain is a combination of yin and yang. It hides countless secrets. And although this mountain doesn't look small on the surface, compared to other mountain ranges on the continent, it's still nothing. Those mountain ranges that span thousands of miles can be found everywhere on the continent. But when you really enter this pagoda mountain, you'll know that this mountain is far more than what it looks like on the surface. There's something else inside. And this is the first big secret of the pagoda mountain. The pagoda mountain is divided into different levels. The first and second levels are the foundation. From the 3rd level onwards, every level is ever-changing. Even I can't figure it out. In fact, I've been on this mountain for so long, but I can't even figure out 1% of it. Thus, since ancient times, countless people have come to this pagoda mountain. Some people have come and left. However, there are too many people who have lost their way here. Even if they have the cultivation of a martial saint, they are still unable to leave. In the end, they starve to death here. Ning Tianya sighed softly. Even if a supreme martial artist can go without food for 3 months, or even 3 years, he still has to eat. Just by absorbing the spiritual energy of the universe can't feed a person. Compared to an ordinary person who gets lost, a supreme martial artist can only resist hunger for a little longer. Because this mountain can't be broken through by force. Even with my current cultivation, I can't destroy any stone on this mountain. When I fly, I can only fly into the clouds. I can't see any direction at all. And I can't fly out even if I want to. When Yi Chunchen came here for the first time, he couldn't get out for more than 2 months. No matter how he flew, he could only helplessly find that from beginning to end, he could only go in circles on the same spot. That's all. Chuyang was astounded. It was just a mountain. But there were actually so many unfathomable mysteries. Ning Tianya said, every level of the pagoda mountain has another universe and another world. The pagoda mountain has one side of the netherworld, and one side of the world of the living. This is the second great secret. In other words, if one comes from the north, he can't see it even if it's close at hand. Even if he's an ordinary person, he can still pass through the mountain if he bumps into it. But if one comes from the south, even a supreme martial artist, or even a second-grade supreme martial artist, has to climb step by step. The third great secret of the pagoda mountain is that it absorbs the spiritual energy of the universe day and night. The density of spiritual energy on the pagoda mountain is the highest among all the heavens. But ordinary people can only cultivate here for 3 years at most. After 3 years, no matter how unwilling you are, you can only come back 3 years later. And after I was injured, the moment I regained my mobility, I came here immediately. This is why the founder of the Yi clan, Yi Chunshan, has to come here to cultivate in seclusion for 3 years every 3 years. That's how it is. Logically speaking, after absorbing spiritual energy for hundreds of thousands of years, there should be countless heavenly treasures on this mountain. But in reality, no one has been able to find any effective herb on the pagoda mountain. Chu Yang was already in a daze. He really didn't expect a mere mountain to be filled with so many mysteries. And it's full of fortuitous encounters. But it's not something that ordinary people can have. Those without fortuitous encounters will immediately take a detour, even if they're in front of a great fortuitous encounter. And Yi Zue was actually able to obtain the legacy of the heavenly demon from here. This is really a great surprise. However, the legacy of the heavenly demon doesn't belong to the pagoda mountain itself. So there's a reason why Yi Zue could obtain it. The fourth great secret of the pagoda mountain: every level has its own requirements. For example, Yi Zue just now, when I brought you to the 8th level, he could only leave. Because with his cultivation, he could only reach the 4th level. Law enforcement officer Lang Ilang used to come here every 3 years. But that fellow is also an anomaly. Every time he came, he would come from the north. He would first pass through the mountain, and then go to the Yi clan. Then he would head north from the Yi clan, find this mountain and enter here. Chu Yang felt a huge shock in his head. Law enforcement officer, Lang Yilang. He came here every 3 years. His body swayed a little, and he couldn't help but sit down on the ground. There were even a few cracks on his buttocks. The moment he sat down, he raised his head and howled miserably. But in his heart, he finally understood. At this moment, Chu Yang wished he could give himself 100 to 200 tight slaps across the face. I'm so stupid, really. I only wanted to think of ways to sneak into the Yi clan. I didn't even think of searching for a place with dense purple crystals outside the Yi clan. A place with great fortune. After all that, it turned out to be here. No wonder Lang Yilang said that it wasn't something that could be found easily. Instead, it required a certain amount of fortuitous encounters before one could discover that place. So that was the case. The law enforcement interrogation hall was located in the north. He had to come from the north every time. So of course, he wouldn't be able to see it. He had to pass through it and go to the south before he could turn around and head here. Chu Yang sighed. A place with great fortune. This pagoda mountain was known to be the world's greatest secret. How could it not be a place with the greatest fortune? The night was bleak and cold. Who said that this place wasn't within the Yi clan's territory? As for the 3 sentences, purple chi comes from the east. The bright moon rises from the mountains. When heaven and earth shine together, he could just look at the moon himself at night. This was really a case of traveling far and wide in search of something, only to find it by sheer luck. Chu Yang almost wanted to howl at the sky to express the joy in his heart. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.